content of this channel is for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. You've tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification button. And please, feel free to share the video. Thank you.
Man, I thought I got rid of that, man. My bad. What's cracking with y'all, man? Y'all good, man? It's your boy Gigi, man. You tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel, man. It's the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up with no chasers, man. Shout out to Rais Muajib, man. I ain't seen you in a minute, Playboy. What's cracking with you, dog? What's cracking? Anyway, man, as I always do, man, right about this time, man, I want to give a shout out to all you haters, man. What's cracking with y'all, man? You know I love my haters, man. Love y'all, man. And, man, make sure you like the video, man. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell notification button so you can stay abreast of what's going on here on the Green Gorilla channel. And as I always do, I want to give an extra special shout out to all of the members here of the Green Gorilla channel before I get started. So, shout out to Lee Ways, Roderick Jackson, Michael Ross, 63rd Samurai, Buchanan Kenton, Sherlin Woe, Passport OG, Brotherly Love 215, Devon Love Ridge, and Ishmael Samad. Big up. Big up to The Watcher, Warnolas, Hostile Adept, Red Pill Revelator, Lord Hamal, Kill the Game, Dr. Thunder, BGS Ibmore, Jason Hales, and Charles Finney. Big up. Big up to Interesting Thought, Bimrock, Blacksword 404, Until I'm Not, Apex Prowler, Naomi Gary, J. Cleveland Green, The Toxic Masculinist, Pulpit 28, and No Sleep. Big up. Shout out to Broken Blade, Mr. King, Larry R., Seth Sun, Afro Truth TV, Show Me, Spain Man, Seventh Coast Dojo, Anthony Davis, I'm Just Jules, and An Honest Look. Big up. Big up to Ricky Dawson, Stefan, Julius Ferguson, True 7360, Mr. Me Too, Call for President, Gold Professor, AKs and Curtains, H-Town, Roguish the Billmonger, and Adrian Thomas. Big up. Big up to Electrician 480, Binga, Cutting Up with the Jones, Zanko 1, D. Scott, Path Guy, Pete Rock, Aaron Peters, Vincent Lindsay, Quiz the Poet, and Black Wizard ADOS. Big up. Big up to Jazz Tech, Shadow Observer, Artisan MC, Troy Warren, Mrs. KP Bailey, Alan Wiley, The Face, Life of Commerce, AI Apostle, Timothy Blewett, and Jeffrey Speed. Big up. Big up to Marvin Battle Jr., Adam, Ignatz Mouse, Brian Peaks, Black Uru, Dr. Tree, 77 Base X, Brian McMurray, Karen S., and Charles Rogers. Big up. Big up to Rick Ross, Sandra Jean, Charles Gilmore, Greg, Barry Little, Mr. Valentino, Cameron 87, Doc LaRock, Mark Swift, Odd Collard, and Donald Watts. Big up. Big up to Coach Hotep, Old Soul Chief, Mr. Blue Collar, TD Hip Hop Media. Can't forget the brethren, Drew Main, Mr. Heat, Sir Anthony, and ML Law, Universal 178, Rasheed Barnes, Aaron Smith, DH, A-Double, Dr. Tiasan Johnson, Kalonja Collar, and W. Pierre 1. Big up to all them, man. Thank you. Can't forget Kevin Samuels, David Carroll, and Forrest Windu. Also on the Patreon side, I want to give a shout out to Robert Wicks, J.E.K., Chris Flowers, Christopher Burton, Daxby, J. Live, Rashawn Phillips Sorrells, Keith Bass, Nick, Albert C., Dr. Ben Vincent, I'm the Light of My Father, Waffle Weave, Darnell Smith, Excalibur, Prezor Prisoner, Taz, Dragon 59, J. Bailey, Mr. Michi Momal, and Asangwa. Big up, man. Big up, man. Big up, man. And if you're inquiring about how you can also contribute to the Green Gorilla channel on an ongoing basis, here's how you do it, and I'll be back with the business.
What's good, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel, the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, no chaser.
Today, I want to introduce you to my new membership program that consists of 5 levels where you can invest in the Green Gorilla channel on a monthly basis and receive level-specific perks. Memberships are special because they improve the quality of the content of the channel and will help me to be able to keep the channel going. Now, to participate in the Green Gorilla channel membership program, all you have to do is hit the join button, which is located right next to the subscribe button on my channel page. Now, for all of my subscribers who decide not to participate in my membership program, nothing will change. The content will keep coming the way it always has. Thanks for watching, and be careful out here, people. Bless. I got to do something about that, man. Let me take care of that right now, man. I got them shots going off. Them gunshots going off, man. Them shots getting fired. But big up to Barry Little, man. Appreciate the donation, sir. He says, incoming tuition drop. Where else can black men express themselves freely, straight up with no chasers? Like, share, subscribe, donate, become a member. You so said all that right. You said all that right. Shout out to Be About Peace and Pleasure. He says the best philosopher in the U.S. I doubt that. I don't want to, take on all of that, but, shout out to that brother, man. Appreciate that, man. I brought 2 friends along with me today, man. Special guests, man. I got the Mad Professor. He always mad. You like the Mad Rapper, the Mad Professor. I was cracking with you, bro. Where you at, man? Where you at, Ron? Where you at? I don't know what's going on with Ron, but we got Dr. Tia Johnson here as well. What's cracking with you, Doc?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
Man, did you fix your rig? You got computer problems out for bad for you, son.
And it's all kind of stuff going on, brother. It's that time of year. You know how it is.
Yeah, man. I didn't want to press you. I was like, damn, you show your rig fucked up. What's going on?
I don't know, man. Just, I think I got a couple of updates this last, week. And, updates will throw your shit into all kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah, bro. Well, I'm glad you're here, man. I'm glad you can make it, man.
All good. Appreciate the invite.
Ron, you good? You here?
What's up? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, man. I couldn't hear you at first initially, bro. What's going on, man?
I'm well, man. Good to be here, man. I'm right here in North Carolina.
I don't even know if I believe that, man, because these kind of sound issues you have when you walk in the beaches in Africa. So, the brother might be on another continent right now. You don't want to say it,
I'm almost there.
He said he's almost there. He got his foot out the door. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to that brother Ray Knowles. He just gave us he gave me a little donation, man. And shout out to the brethren Sage just hit me up on the Cash App, man. And another brethren hit me up, man. I can't, Rashad McKinney and Corbett Goodwin. Big up to y'all, man. I appreciate your donations, man. Real talk, man. We ain't even got started yet. But look, today we're going to have a conversation about, the whole line from the Combahee River Collective. If black women were free, ... And you know what comes after the dot, right? It would mean that everyone else would have to be free, since our freedom would necessitate the destruction of all the systems of oppression. Okay. Punctuation, period. Okay? So
tall order.
That's saying a lot right there. I mean, this is, one could argue, the prototype, the precursor to all black feminism. This is like the initial statement. This is black feminism 1.0. It is. Am I lying? This is it. Okay?
That's it.
So, I mean, it starts, and for the most part, it stays there. Like, I mean, I don't see too much movement or deviation away from the claim that if black women were free, it would mean that everyone else would have to be free, because by freeing ourselves, we would destroy all of the systems of oppression. And then everyone else would be free by default. Okay. That's a tall statement, man. What do you guys think about that? I mean, I know we're going to get into some commentary related to this because we have a video we're going to watch and we're going to comment on it. But got any preliminary remarks that you'd like to say about it?
Well, I'll just say that if it is true that if all black women are free, everybody else would be free, then it follows that everyone who wants to be free, black men, certain members of the white population, you know, the LGBTQ people, people who are poor, talking about class, Native Americans. I mean, the list can go on and on and on. If it is the case that all of us would be free if we just attach ourselves to black women, the question is, why aren't we free now? If they got the magic salt.
Go ahead, man.
If they got the magic sauce, you know what I'm saying? You know, right. if you say you got the winning lottery ticket, you know, and I'm poor and whatever, and you say that, you know, because I got all this wealth or whatever, all you got to do is to attach yourself to me, then you'll be wealthy too. And then I'm like, well, okay, if that is the formula, if that's the case, then, you know, we're talking about a statement that was crafted, what, 1972 or something like that?
I think it was, yes, either that. I think maybe 74 was the I'm not quite sure. I can't remember. Let me look that. I'm gonna fact check that up.
Well, the early 70s.
Yes, it's definitely the early. I think it's 74, but don't quote me on it. You know, I'm getting old myself, and so you know, I can't remember everything. You know what I mean?
It's like get on the bus. Let me get on the bus. Let me get on the bus.
Right. So I know this for certain, that the Combahee River Collective was active as an organization between 74 and 80. And that's, of course, 1974 and 1980. However, the statement was made in 77, okay? But the inception of them as a collective originated, right, in 74, okay? So the statement is a 77 statement, okay? 6 years after I was born, okay? So any preliminary remarks, Doc Johnson?
I mean, if you're going to tell me that, you know, everybody's going to be doing well if you do well, it sounds like the introduction to a pyramid scheme to me. But this shit, look, man, this concept came out at a time where you had an almost kind of ontological jealousy by, you know, from black feminists toward black men in general. And their idea was that black men were somehow, you know, privileged in a way that they weren't, and that we somehow benefited in a way that they didn't. So, you know, the stuff we saw really culminate by the time you get to the rise of BLM. You remember when they had this little period where they were talking about how they needed to go back and retroactively decide, you know, who should lead now based on who wasn't allowed to lead in the 70s. I don't know. You remember that logic? We were hearing. A lot of that comes out of that historical jealousy. And I think her name, I always forget her name, Barbara. She was in the video we were talking about. Barbara, I want to call her Smith. Thank you. I think I always call her Christian. It's not the one. But yeah, Barbara.
There's two of them. It's Barbara Christian too.
And Ransby.
But they led, and she in particular had a lot of that kind of jargon going on, which I look at as really a kind of jealousy, but it's a jealousy at a perceived status that black men had that I argue we never did. You know what I mean? But they had this kind of sensibility about them where they felt that, you know, in order to gain what they didn't have, they needed to somehow replace black men. And I think it came to a head with the rise of BLM. But I think that language started as early as what you're talking about now. Get behind black women and everybody will be free. That to me is the beginning point of that kind of approach.
Yeah.
So, and let me just add. Let me just also add, from as a religious scholar, and we've did this on your channel Thank you, Gigi. We went over my article on the Black Messiah, the Black male Messiah. This is another way of talking about the Black female, the Black female Messiah.
You saw the thumbnail, did you? Did you peep the thumbnail?
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah.
Did you see it, Ron?
Which one?
The thumbnail to this video.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I put the images of
it's a Messiah,
black woman, a black
right.
female Messiah. You know what I mean? I don't know if you can really. I mean, people who are watching the video ought to be able to see it, right? I'm not going to put it up, but so look. I don't know who it was that gave me this video. I think Dr. Neil was the one that conjured up this video. Am I wrong or am I right about that?
Yeah, I sent it to both of you guys.
Now, I don't know how you came across this video, bro.
You know, I was just surfing on YouTube, man, and it came up on my feed. You know, I was writing, and because I got a whole chapter in my book, man, on black women and white saviors, and so I was just looking at some stuff, and that it happened to just show up.
Right. And it's a relatively recent video. Like the video was published, I think
this year.
April. Yeah, it was published in April. Like, so I mean, like maybe 3 weeks ago, this video was published. So I mean, like this is a few black women like who are like pioneers. At least two of them. I know I can say with confidence, but that Barbara Ransby and Barbara Smith are like some of the founding mothers of black feminism. I can say that with confidence. Now the other two, I don't necessarily think I can say that. Okay, but I know for certain I can say that Barbara Ransby and Barbara Smith are like the founding mothers of black feminism. Okay, very influential. Okay. Anyway, man, let's look at excerpts from this video. Let's just get right into it, man. Let's just dive into it. And I only clipped 27 minutes of it. Now, we don't have to watch all of it. I mean, you can stop me at any point, but there are key points that I stop at myself, and you'll tell easily like where I stopped and why I stopped there. And I just wanted to get your opinion on like what it all means and how to interpret it from your perspective, given the work that you do. Okay. And I'll offer up my, analysis and my evaluations as well. You know what I mean? So shout out to Otis. He says they jealous. Let me make sure that I housekeep before I even go any further. He said they just jealous of the attention black men get. Remember the study where they were watched misbehaving students and the black boys got more attention? They tried to flip it to a privilege. So, yeah, and this is, predicated upon the concept, I think, of intersectional invisibility. The idea that men get more attention, and women are rendered invisible, and so even like the attention which turns out to be negative or has negative outcomes is still a form of privilege, right? Which to me is absurd, but I mean that's just how they perceive it. So also shout out to Cutting Up with the Jones. I appreciate that. He says we got the Black Avenger Scholars. Also shout out to Dead Set Anime. I know you did something with him last night, didn't you, Doc?
The other night, yeah, definitely. Shout out to him.
He says I'm here flexing my negative liberty. Yeah, I did a show last night. It got under people's skin a little bit. Electrician 480 says, all snap, the three wise men. This is going to be good. Shout out to him. Shout out to Cameron 87. He says, peace, GG, support our scholars. Show you right. Shout out to T Fitness for you. Shout out to that brother, man. And yeah, let's just get going though. I'll be doing this for quite a bit of time. So let me just get it started. I'm gonna make you all somewhat a little bit smaller, not absolutely smaller, but somewhat, so we can see the video itself. All right, let's do it, man.
Okay, well, we're here again. I feel like I just spoke, but I'm happy to be in this conversation because I really respect also all the folks in conversation with me. So we were asked to say.
By the way, that's Barbara Ransby. Okay, just in case you don't know. Okay, she's like one of the founding mothers of Black feminism. So,
say a few words on this concept that comes out of, it's taken from the Combahee River Collective, but it kind of undergirds a lot of what Black feminist praxis has been about. If Black women were free, ... I said in my remarks earlier that feminist politics, Black freedom movement politics, BIPOC politics, if we use that term, are often described as narrow, divisive politics that take away from the whole. In fact, those of us who were involved in the electoral politics the last presidential season, some of you perhaps supported Elizabeth Warren, Barbara and I supported Bernie Sanders, and we found ourselves in a real struggle there to foreground the issue of racial justice and gender justice. And of course, the politics of solidarity and coalition we're all in this together, but we were also insisting on the idea that we have to be specific about the ways in which class oppression and racial capitalism impinge upon the lives of specific groups, in this case, Black women and women of color. And that is a position of strength. That is a unifying position, not a divisive position, because indeed, because of Black women's positionality.
Can I say that? Gigi, can I say something?
hey, look, I stopped.
Gigi.
Yeah, go ahead and say something, man.
I want to ask the question, who is being divisive? Who is being divisive? Who is seen as divisive?
Well, Black men are perceived as divisive.
But in terms of, so what they're talking about the left, right?
Right.
And you have people on the left who are not identitarians. And they see identitarian politics as basically a distraction from classical leftist thought. Those who have been rooted in Marxism, class analysis, democratic socialism.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Material dialectics.
Yeah, material dialectics, absolutely. And here's the thing, man. So, okay, we can look at the gays and say the gays are divisive. We can look at the white women and say that the white women are divisive. But we really have to ask the question, once you insert Black women into once you insert Black feminists into the discourse, who is regarded as the most divisive?
Uh-oh. So they shooting shots under the table, huh?
Right. Well, one could argue that they're divisive. Okay. Like, to me, what this is it's a preemptive justification for being divisive in and of itself. That's all it is to me. Now, I'm not trying to be ignorant by saying that, but in the context of leftist politics, which primarily, like you said, classical leftist politics is about economics and class. Let's face it, that's what classic leftist liberalism is about. Okay? They introduce, and one could argue that the introduction of Black feminism only really actually becomes of import due to the fact that they're dovetailing white feminist politics and their kind of exclusion or marginalization within the context of that movement, which, by the way, one could argue, I mean, like Bill Burr, this has to be like the most successful social movement in history. Now, of course, there are people who, like BGS is going to argue, well, this is the result of population trends and dynamics according to, pre-industrial, post-industrial societies and things of this nature. But all I can say is, what does this woman mean when she talks about the Black female positionality? The Black female situatedness, And so, I stopped it there because I want to gauge what you think about this.
Yeah. I mean, on one level, I think she wants to. So it's interesting, right? So she says that she supported Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders, when he was doing his thing in 2016 and 2020, he was pressed on the issues of identity. And I'm reading the book. I'm reading Bernie's most recent book right now, and Bernie acknowledges it and he would do it, but Bernie is a hardcore class guy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? He's just a hardcore class guy. And okay, so if we're talking about class, so here's the thing. Let me just say this. So when they say positionality, what's interesting, although she says she supported Bernie Sanders, when she talks about positionality, it seems as though at one level it's abstract from class. Okay, that is that Black women have some type of flat positionality that that's undifferentiated. So we can't talk about Black women in terms of lower class Black women or working class Black women, lower middle class Black women, middle class Black women, upper middle class, on and on and on and on and on.
Right.
So her thing is this positionality, it's kind of it's almost a, to a certain degree, it's kind of nebulous. At another level, it flattens everything.
Mm-hmm. Right. So this is the way I couch that, right? And here's my explanation of it. But I want to get Dr. Johnson's first, so I don't influence, what he might say.
I didn't have a lot to say at this juncture. The most I was just going to say is, this is the feminist, the academic feminist equivalent of this is all Jermaine's fault. I mean, that's essentially what they're coming to the table with, and their very identity is rooted in framing Black men as their primary opposition, and that's because that's the only way they can parallel white women and try to access some of that social equity around empathy for white women and female vulnerability. Because by and large, due to the racial politics that we could talk about, most the mainstream don't generally see Black women as vulnerable the way these feminists are trying to couch themselves. But the only way they can rationalize that vulnerability is by contributing to the negative kind of connotations about Black masculinity and Black manhood. So they keep dipping into that well because that's the closest they can get to what white women are able to do.
And look, and let me just say this. Throughout the entirety of this video, the word Black man, Black male, brother is never, ever one time mentioned, man. Not at all. Not once.
They were the founders of the gender war.
And to me, it's shocking. But the way I perceive it is this. To argue about, a unique Black female positionality, especially connected to the if Black women were free, ... To me, it expresses that there is a negative, universal subject. And that subject is the Black lesbian woman, okay? The Black lesbian poor woman, if you want to, talk about each element of categories, or to describe each of the categories that they mention within the context of the Combahee River Collective. So the Black poor lesbian woman is justified in fighting against everyone in the entire world.
Don't forget she's also disabled now, so you have to add that.
But I can only go into what was said at the time, but I get it.
Well, and trans. She's now trans.
Exactly. So this is what, like, a person like Adolph Reed, who I would consider to be a classical leftist, right? This is one of his critiques of intersectionality. It's like, well, like, where do you stop? Because, I mean, the ultimate argument that these women are making is that somehow they're left out, they're pushed to the periphery based upon an intersection, or a multiplicity of, identity classifications. But so the ultimate goal, I think, was to, get rid of the, the oppressiveness and the essentialism related to race or gender, But what they end up doing is reifying these kind of categories by adding more essential categories to the mix. And then, like if you add more and more categories to the mix, you're not really doing you're not getting rid of the original categories at all. You're reifying them, but in a unique way. But that's really esoteric. But the whole point is, to me, it expresses that there is a negative universal subject that's justified in, being combative with everyone. And it does seem divisive to me, right? Because that subject is the most oppressed subject. And this negative subject fights against oppression through what? As far as I'm concerned, it's a kind of, for lack of better terms of trying to classify it, it's a kind of Nietzschean slave morality that, oddly enough, cannot be held up by anything other than, guess what it is? White male patriarchy. Which is the odd thing about it, because all of the laws, the policies, the directives, the initiatives, and the acts that are utilized to uphold Black, lesbian, women's freedom require what? White police officers, white bureaucrats, white officials to enforce and endorse them. But the sad part about it is, this political strategy is one in which the true patriarchs are actually left unscathed. They don't really get harmed by any of this.
No. And I would add, so here's what's interesting. So when you read Black feminist thought, there's virtually no discussion of white men. Just white men are completely absent. I remember, a number of years ago, man, I taught one of Beverly Guy Sheftall's readers. Beverly Guy, she's at Spelman. She published an anthology in '95, the first one of two anthologies, called Words of Fire, with all these Black women's writings from the 17th century to the present. And what's interesting, man, when you get to the most contemporary writings and stuff, people like Cheryl Clark and people like, Barbara Smith and Barbara Christian and these other people, the white male is completely absent.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah, conversations about the white man
all over the place, though.
Or removed. Right?
Well, the Black man is everywhere.
He's laying next to them while they're writing this, but that's another whole conversation.
Oh shit, bro. Oh, man. Stop it, bro. That's crazy, but let me continue, because we don't want to be here all day doing this. I know y'all got shit to do, so.
In society, and all the metrics bear this out, from housing to victims of violence to job market, etc., are on the bottom of the hierarchy.
Now, the question is this accurate? I mean, so what they do is they say, we're the penultimate subject. We're the negative universal subject. As it pertains to poverty, we're at the bottom. As it pertains to employment, we're at the bottom. As it pertains to, wages, we're at the bottom. As it pertains to violence, we're at the bottom. Okay? The question is like...
Now they're including prisons now, too. Don't forget about it. They're including prisons now. She doesn't
they have
do it,
to
but
mean,
the others do it.
When they talk about these things, they must mean the bottom of women. Because they can't be making the argument that they're at the bottom of all of these metrics of every identity group that exists or every demographic that's out here. They can't be saying that.
I've heard them do it in two ways. I've heard them say it and they assume that the audience just gets it, because this is how intersectionality works. You assume that Black women have it worse because women are supposed to have it worse and Black people are supposed to have it worse. And so you have this kind of additive assumption, and we kind of reach that conclusion. I've seen them push that. But I've also seen, especially when you talk about groups like the African American Policy Forum under Kimberly Crenshaw, they'll use just what you described, these little sly statements that are incomplete. Like girls get, punished more than any other demographic in school. But what they really mean is any other female demographic. But they'll leave certain terms out and just leave you with the assumption, because it also generates resources. It also generates attention. And it also generates the assumption that, wow, if they're saying this publicly, it must be true. So by the time you get to groups like Goldman Sachs and you have internal administrators who are Black females who are advocating for their own demographic and suggesting that the corporation should invest in them, these kind of statements then become the means by which they rationalize making these kinds of decisions, like putting $10 billion into Black women. That kind of dynamic works for them, but it is dishonest. It's disingenuous. And you notice she didn't mention any stats for a reason.
But
they be held accountable.
So this is what they do. And Curry is the person who points this out. You know, what they do is they rely on categories, philosophical categories. Like when you say women, I mean, you're talking about women qua being women, like the category womanhood, right? You take Black, it's a category, right? And then you ascribe, of course, you know, the qualities that people who are in these categories suffer from, like oppression. And then you use the categories to make like matters of fact statements, right, about the world. But at the end of the day, actually all these are moral intuitions predicated upon categories. And you can fact check whether or not they cohere with reality itself. I mean, you don't have to just, you know, use the categories to, you know, draw inferences. You can actually look at data to determine at any given point in time, like who's at the bottom of the violence barrel, who's dying the most from whatever phenomena. You don't have to use, you know, like analytic statements to do it. You can just look at the data because it's there. We have it compiled, right? So I just think it is a little bit disingenuous to say, you know, well, Black women are at the bottom, like especially at this day and age. Like, why are we doing this? Why are we engaged in this exercise, right?
So what she giving you? Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I just want to say is, you know, when I first saw this, I said, this is nothing but, I'm gonna use Ishmael Reed's language. He meant something else, but I'm gonna flip it. This is all theoretical mumbo jumbo. That's what this is. This is just mumbo. This is mushed mouth word salad. And we can use the philosophical language, you know, in categories and everything like this, man. But this is just theoretical mumbo jumbo, which they're good at. Very good at.
Keep in mind, this is a bi-coastal presentation between, I think it's Cal State LA and what's the university that they're filming it at? I don't know exactly.
It
should be on the video, but I'm blanking on. But it's a bi-coastal presentation. Last time I checked, it only had a couple hundred views. So I think it's an interesting statement there about the state of, you know, academic Black feminism, at least in terms of how it's articulated, you know, in this fashion. I think it's really melded into how this is playing out in institutions. It's far more subtle and nuanced, and it's broadened. It's been financed in a lot of different ways. But the old school academic Black feminism that we're seeing represented by these figures, you know, I mean, look at how many people are in the room. You know what I mean?
Right.
Interesting statement, but go ahead.
So let me continue with it though, because it's a little bit. We got a little bit more terrain to cover. So let me start getting to bigger chunks of it. I'll stop it here and there though.
So if Black women are liberated, and Black women are in all the other categories that cut across race, right? Black women are disabled in large numbers. Black women are unemployed in large numbers. Black women have mental illness. Black women are queer, but, you know, so we are not, we don't see these categories as mutually exclusive but interrelated. And because they're interrelated, we actually embody a politic of resistance that is liberatory and has liberatory potential for everyone. So anyway, that's just a kind of reaction to the term. But there's 2 points that I would like to make. Well, 3 really, and I know I only have a couple minutes. But 3 points I want to make, riffing off of that a little bit. The last book I wrote was called Making All Black Lives Matter, and it was about the movement for Black lives and what is often termed the larger Black Lives Matter movement. If there was one ideological anchor for that movement, it was Black feminism, in terms of the people that emerged as the primary organizers, in terms of the refusal to buy into a politics of respectability. And so that was very hopeful to me. And I think that we need to mark that, we need to name that, we need to own that.
Can you pause it?
Yeah. So I knew you would have me pause it there, but go ahead.
Yeah, man. Well, I just want to be clear. See, this is something I think people overlook. She's correct when she says that BLM, extends out of black feminism. She's absolutely correct. And I want people to understand this language has been, in play, as it were, since the mid 70s, right? You get intersectionality at the end of the 1980s. And then by the time you get to 2015, you get BLM. I want people to see, without technology as we understand it today, this is how long it took for these ideas to start in the academy and work their way into popular culture. So when people talk about brothers who are trying to build a language, trying to build an analysis, who are publishing, doing research, doing work, and I hear this all the time. Well, when is it going to manifest? When are we going to do this? When are we going to do that? You do have to understand these ideas do take time to translate. Now, I think it happens a little faster because of what we have today in terms of technology, but this is what so I'm simply saying BLM in 2015 starts with the Combahee River Collective. It starts with academic Black feminism. It starts with these very women we're hearing from. And it took a couple of generations really to kind of make its way into the mainstream. So, I just want to put that on the table.
And mainstream it is. But go ahead, Doc. Go ahead, Ron.
And the other thing I want to say is that, in addition to what Dr. Johnson just said, is that these are ideas that have to be tested in real time.
Yes, sir.
So what happens is that BLM is the moment when these ideas are put to a true test.
Correct.
And the question is, did they pass the test?
I don't think they passed the test. I don't think they passed the test. And let me just say this. So if Black feminism is a movement that is undergirded by the notion, the assumption that if Black women are free, ... Of course, like how it ends. I mean, it ends by saying it would mean that everyone else would have to be free, since our freedom would necessitate the destruction of all systems of oppression. The question is, was BLM to any extent an arm of oppression itself? Did it marginalize? Did it colonize? Did it extort? Did it utilize the positionality of other subjects in the Black community in order to catapult a certain segment of the organization BLM to success, material success? Because my postulation is going to be that BLM, nobody knew exactly what it was in the beginning, but people thought it was a hashtag. They didn't think it was an organization.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah.
Okay, so it came to St. Louis, came to Ferguson, the organization did, and it hijacked a grassroots movement that was already taking place on the ground there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, it was already happening. They just came and took all of the attention. So they, quite literally, they might not have had Gucci boots, but whatever type of boots they had, they swung them over the fence of oppression and said, we need to take the mic now. We got the mic. We're going to focus on what we consider to be the most important issues related to Black folks, which is, of course, sex, language. Class language was missing as far as I'm concerned. I mean, they talked about violence to some degree, but I mean, Black women and Black trans women, I mean, everything was foregrounded, but Black men. Now, how can you even talk about Black Lives Matter and police deaths and killings without talking largely and centering largely Black men, who is the biggest demographic that's impacted by this phenomenon in the U.S.? So it's confusing, but
and that's also part of that jealousy I was talking about, because at the end of the day, they know Black men have the statistics that they want to rationalize the resources, because this is really about resources. Everything we hear Black feminists really doing is selling themselves as the primary victims for the sake of resources. And so they know their primary competition is actually Black men, because our numbers are worse on almost every metric that people value. Our numbers are worse. So they have to obscure, they have to change the conversation, they have to include themselves in areas they're not really represented in. They have to do all of this to secure resources, mainly by competing with Black men.
And
But
they committed the same, I'm gonna use this word, the same sins that they accused Black men of committing 60 years ago during the Civil Rights Movement. You know, they said that civil rights, was really fueled by Black women, but Black men took all the credit and everything like that, and that Black men became the faces and spokespersons and blah 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 blah. And so it's just an inversion of the stuff that they said that black male leadership did 60 years ago.
But I mean, they're going to be to some degree self-critical. I think that they understand all of these critiques being leveled by us. I think they understand it amongst themselves. But of course, keeping with their tradition of centering themselves, they're going to do what they can to try to deflect any external criticism that might come from outside of their ranks. You know what I'm saying? Because even within the context of the conversation that they're having here, they're going to be like, they're teasing out to some degree the implicit contradictions within their own ideology. But we'll get to that. So shout out to Salty Balls. Jesus, every time I see that shit, it kills me. He says, Discourse 2.3, thine doctors dialogue, deliberated with dialectics by thine sages delivering didactics. Man, sonic halls of discourse inspire the fire of aspiring scholars like hip-hop did on the pavement about 50 solar passes ago. This dude's something else, man. A Manospherian bard of sorts, man. But anyway, man, let me dig through a little bit more of this, man. She's her conversation is almost done.
It is not a movement without contradictions and flaws by any means.
You said that right.
Greatest strengths, I think, and the formidable potential of that movement was the Black feminism that was at the core. In fact,
yeah, I said BLM hijack Ferguson. Yeah. That's a sin I can't get over.
One of those meetings that Barbara Smith and I were in, when we were the two Barbaras, was a Black Lives Matter meeting, which was very intense and interesting. But I want to mark that as part of what defines this moment. The other is this notion of anti-blackness, and carrying over from my the way I began. We built in the 70s and 80s multiracial women of color coalitions of third world women and third world people, incorporating the anti-colonial struggle into our politics and our worldview. But I do want to say there is a usefulness in identifying anti-blackness specifically within the large scheme of things, because within the Latinx community, there's anti-blackness. Within the global community, there's anti-blackness, even though many other groups are suffering. But it seems to cut across many different categories of oppression and resistance and be embedded in it. And I also want to say, as a disclaimer, many people in academic circles who talk about anti-blackness also subscribe to the notions of Afro-pessimism, which I do not. But I do think it is important to talk about the persistence and enduring nature of anti-Black racism in particular in many of our coalitions. And sometimes we have multiracial coalitions and we say they're people of color, and Black people, especially Black working class people, are just not there. And the inclusivity of the term people of color is a strength, but it also can be a weakness when it obscures the makeup of the coalition itself. The third thing I want to say a little bit about when we say when Black women are free is to invite us to step on that messy, complicated, layered terrain of freedom. Like, what does it mean? And in many of the movements that I'm involved in, many of the organizations I'm involved in right now, we're talking about what does collective freedom mean, as opposed to notions of individual freedom, which we hear from the right all the time, notions of individual liberty, regardless of who it impacts. Like, in some ways, some of us might actually have less individual freedom at the same time that we create and build a society where all of us will have more freedom across the board. I think they're critical questions like bodily autonomy, which is essential and a core notion of freedom, the notion that everyone should have what they need to survive and thrive. But there are also many environmentally damaging things that we do as individuals and feel like it's our right and feel like it's an expression of our freedom in some way. So I think we also have to, in very hard discussions, interrogate notions of freedom and really embrace the notion of collective freedom and freedom to have a just society, which may also mean inconveniences for those of us who are a little bit more privileged right now. So I think I'll stop there and look forward to the other comments.
Can I say something?
Yes, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the question I have, I'm going to take us back to old Wendy's commercial. Where's the beef? Where's the beef? Where's the evidence? I mean, all this, we've been involved with all these collective struggles and global and anti-colonialism, blah, 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 blah. Where is the evidence? What have these so-called works of solidarity actually produced? What's interesting? So the book that she wrote, All Lives Matter, okay, is basically a book where she talks about, she just documents all these different groups of women who meet in different parts of the city, and they might be talking to, police chiefs, and they're talking to city council people and stuff like that, quote unquote, holding them accountable. Okay. But there's nothing substantive that comes out of it. You know what I mean? So it's like with the conservatives. So the conservatives work for over 50 years to overturn Roe v. Wade. Okay. They had a long struggle, decade by decade, with each presidential administration, state by state, fighting against abortion. And then, bam, the Supreme Court, they finally put all their judges, they get a majority, and Roe v. Wade is overturned.
Right.
Now, the conservatives could talk about so it's like with conservatives, the thing about conservatives, they have actual proof of what they do, but there's no material, tangible things that you can put your hand on that these people in all their works of solidarity have produced. Occupy Wall Street. What did Occupy Wall Street do? What did it produce?
And then one could argue, like, even to some degree, there's some things that BLM produced. But I wouldn't necessarily say that it's owing solely to BLM being the mouthpiece, the official mouthpiece of what transpired and the reason for which these things actually transpired to begin with. And let's not forget, there are black men who are dead over what happened in Ferguson and other parts of the country in terms of like uprisings and stuff like that. Like Darren Seals, he's dead. We don't know how he died or whatever the case may be, but we know that Garza and Colors and the other lady, I can't even remember her name, they good. Mm-hmm. They got beachfront property off this.
Yep, 90 million.
But you got some guys who are dead about this.
Mm-hmm.
So but I kind of want to go forward, but like here's the deal. I wouldn't even say that like black feminism has been working to the advantage of all black women either. I just think that there's a certain kind of black woman who's principally catapulted because of this shit. I'm just being frank about it. You know what I mean? The reality is like highly educated, upwardly mobile black women benefit from the discourse of black feminism. Maybe some queer women or whatever the case may be, but like, did the vast majority of black people actually benefit from it? I don't think so.
But here's my question when it comes to that kind of thing, though. When we start to see policy and resources directed at, say, making sure black girls get a hand up in school and get help, even though we know the data points to black boys, do the women that aren't part of that black feminist narrative, Do you hear them speaking up in any great numbers about their sons? I don't know. I'm not saying I know definitively, but I don't really hear it. But that's not to say it's not happening. So I pose it as a question to my learned colleagues. But I look at this and I'm saying, at what point when we do start to see benefits that do help Black girls and women advance, is there any statement made about the boys or the men, even coming from the women that don't include themselves in those Black feminist circles? And what does that mean if we don't hear it?
I tell you what. So Kelly Brown Douglas, she's a theologian. She's a womanist, and so after Trayvon Martin was killed, she wrote a book called Stand Your Ground, and she has, well, at the time she had a teenage son who was Trayvon Martin's age, and so in the book she talks about her son and how she saw her son in Trayvon Martin. And she is the only womanist, and today womanism and feminism have connections. She is the only Black woman, I'll just put it like this, the only Black woman scholar who uses Black male death of a Black teenager as the starting point for any type of theoretical enterprise. The only one.
Yeah, so let me just say this, okay? So, I have gone over the entirety, I've read the entire Combahee River Collective online in the Black Manosphere for everyone who wants to see it, okay? There's several sections to this document. Section 2, what we believe, 4 paragraph in. And it says, although we are feminists and lesbians, we feel solidarity with progressive Black men and do not advocate the fractionalization that white women who are separatists demand. Our situation as Black people necessitates that we have solidarity around the fact of race, which white women, of course, do not need to have with white men unless it is their negative solidarity as racial oppressors. We struggle together with Black men against racism, while we also struggle with Black men about sexism. Now that's section 2, paragraph 4, the Combahee River Collective. Now, as I look in the audience of this video, no disrespect, but it's white women in the video. But are there Black men in the video? Like, are Black men actually being invited to have conversations related to the subject matter of Black feminism? I'm not saying they've never been invited or like there is no space for discourse, but man, the spaces, the gaps are few and far between, bro.
Well, we don't exist. We don't exist in their minds, bro. We don't, the Combahee, they made those references, to Black men as, people who they're connected to in solidarity. But that simply isn't the nature of at least literary feminism. That's not the nature of it. I mean, when we're talked about, it's always the negative, and we're patriarchs and all that kind of stuff. But this is not about some type of collective liberation or whatever. It's, you got to get Black men to get rid of their patriarchy. But for the most part, I think this really categorizes where we are. This is the epistemology. This is the worldview. When you look at that room and you see there's no Black men there, and you listen to each person talk, listen to them closely, and you'll notice that Black men are completely non-existent from their worldview.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that's the thing. Like, quite literally, this has been, to me, it's like this is a zero-sum game. Like, Black women cannot be rendered visible if they don't make Black men invisible. Or only visible to the extent that they can utilize them for their own purposes or their own political objectives, which to me was what Black Lives Matter was. It was taking Black male death as a springboard to catapult their own politics, which I find, like, when you start talking about people's death, to me that's just morally objectionable. I mean, I don't even know how else to say it other than to say that it's repulsive. I mean, think about like a group of black men taking rape and using it as a context to talk about their own issues, prostate cancer or some shit, like, you know, or parental alienation or something like that. People would be mortified. As it pertains to this, nobody cares.
This is pathological. This is pathological, bro. In terms of the psychology that this set of women have in relationship to black men.
But let me continue because there's a little bit more ground to cover. So we're a third of the way through it. Okay, so let's keep going.
Almost every student independently quoted the line, "Our freedom would necessitate the destruction of all the systems of oppression." It is one of the most profoundly inspiring lines in a statement full of inspiring lines. And this statement is grounded in the experience of the black female body. Yet, it is not essentialist in its ethos, its approach, or its philosophy.
And I gotta stop right there. Because people are beginning to believe otherwise. Like, I mean, so on one hand, they say, well, this is not essentialist, but to me, it just seems like it is essentialist. It seems doctrinal. It seems like absolutist to me. But we know that it's not, okay? And they're gonna have to admit that it can't be, even though they practice political preferentiality related to, you know, this kind of rubric associated with, we got to look after the sister girls first. Like, I mean, I just play like I do short bus Saturdays, right? And I go over various shorts. So like Kim Foster to me, one could, you know, argue, you know, she is an intersectional feminist baby. I mean, I don't know how, you know, how else to better frame it. The feminist movement gave birth to a thinker, a content creator, activist, a political entity, Kim Foster, right? For Harriet, or whatever the case may be, the woman who founded that blog and who, you know, does content creation and commentary and politics related to black women, right? So one of the things she says, she begins with, like, whatever else happens in my world, like I could love a man, be on the phone with a man, going goo goo gaga with a man, but at the end of the day, it's woman first. Black women first. I know at the end of the day, I can count on black women before I can, like, fuck my lover. It's these women. To me, that's G's up, hoes down. That's what it sounds like to me.
That's what it is.
But it's the inverse of that for women, as you know, like, and I guess I get it to some degree, but I mean, but look, you got to think, we're gonna take the kind of political sentimentality that a group of young guys had like at 20, 21, 22 in hip hop and use that and extrapolate to kind of justify like this shit here. I just don't get it. I don't understand it, bro.
It's tribalism. It's tribalism, bro.
But let's push through it a little more. That's like, is she serious?
I will not address the right-wing or the left-wing critics of identity politics. I've done that elsewhere. I really want to meditate and share with you these initial meditations on black women, where we embrace the Combahee statement and explore a politic that is embodied but not essentialist. So the Combahee statement is a paradox. How can their analysis be absolutely grounded in the black female body, yet be non-essentialist? It is not placing the black woman at the pinnacle of civilization, nor on a pedestal of pristine femaleness. Instead, it is placing her at the foundation of constructing freedom for everyone.
Jesus Christ.
I'm like, is this narcissism?
It is.
It's the black female messiah complex. I don't know how else. It's a Jehovah complex.
Hey, you know, it's interesting. I'm just going to say this, man. White people know what they're doing with black feminists. They know what they're doing. They don't take them seriously. They pay lip service to them. They're you saw them. You see the room. You see who's there. You see who showed up and everything. This is at a university. It was probably done late in the afternoon, in the early evening, or something like that. And look who's there. You know what I'm saying? I mean, this is just the white people just don't, and I see it. I've seen it in my context, man. White people just sit back and let them talk.
Look,
that's what they do.
This is like self-cunnilingus. I mean, this kind of, but it doesn't have to be as brash as all of this, because a lot of what they're pushing for, in many ways, has already been secured. You know, in a particular sense, when you look at, you know, especially when you compare it to black male life, you talk about everything from employment to education, to so on and so forth. A lot of it has been secured, but it no longer has to be done in this way. See, my reasoning for why the room is empty is not because black feminism is non-existent. It's because it's been absorbed into the mainstream mechanism. You know, but in that regard, you know, this type of language isn't required for them to get support. They get it through other means, but they get it. This is a throwback to the 1970s. This is almost like a celebration of a classic era, but it doesn't really need to function this way anymore. And it hasn't been. This is how you get a BLM with $90 million to play with. And that doesn't even include the millions they started getting after 2015, right? This is a nod to an older style. Right. Even when you were talking about the Combahee River Collective's statement, they don't follow that. It's a classic era kind of nod, but the only men they really talk about including, and that was when they talked about it, were, you know, male feminists who were in short numbers then and relatively are now. But men that have a varying opinion. I mean, let me ask you this. When's the last time you heard a male feminist actually push back against a black feminist and offer something critical? Not out of a spirit of just being combative, but a critical pushback. When's the last time you've seen it?
It doesn't happen.
Because I've never seen it. I've never seen a publication, an article, a book. I've never seen any serious pushback in any critical way. You know, that, so to me, you know, even who they're talking about when they talk about men is virtually non-existent. You know, it's really a circle jerk, you know, kind of celebration of a classic era of black feminism that's no longer needed. But it is effective in terms of how it functions, at least when compared to what black males get, but nowhere near what white women get.
And to add what Dr. J is saying, in terms of its incorporation, it's been commodified. This is commodified. This is a product of capitalism. Mm-hmm. They are a commodity. Okay. And that in and of itself says a lot about their non-threatening nature in relationship to the broader society, the so-called patriarchy and all that kind of stuff. Because if it was truly a threat to the status quo, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah, so I'm gonna tell you what was radical to the status quo. The Black Panthers, which was a lot of women involved in the Black Panther Party. Mm-hmm. Okay, the Civil Rights Movement. Like, you know that a movement is radical when white people use like police and you know surveillance to monitor and control it. Mm-hmm. You know that it's radical when, You know, you see the boys, you know, like with alphabet letters on their shirts and shit like that, who are infiltrating and monitoring and doing what they can to be subversive related to the movement. So I think that, you know, Dr. Neal is right when he says, like, this works, like, this is a movement that works in tandem with the status quo. It's not radical enough. It pretends, it pats itself on the back as being radical, but it's not really radical.
It's kind of like, there was a debate between Judith Butler and the philosopher Nancy Fraser back in the 90s.
I
Nancy
gotta see that. So, I mean, was it online? It wasn't recorded, was it?
No, it wasn't recorded. It was on paper.
Okay. Yeah.
And
now I fuck with. I know I've met and had dinner with Nancy Fraser, so I definitely would fuck.
Because the gay people, there was a point in which people like Judith Butler were claiming that homosexuality was a threat to capitalism, and that going back to the ideas of the family, and they had made this connection between the family and capitalism and all this kind of stuff, and that it can't be fully incorporated into capitalism because it will destabilize capitalism. And Nancy Fraser's retort was, most of the claims and the arguments that you're making are not material claims; these are basically cultural claims, But to fast forward, what has happened? We're in a moment right now where homosexuality is a part of the structure of capitalism. That capitalism actually absorbed it, okay, and made it, and now it's a part of the economy. It's something that is bought and it is sold. And so feminism, this black feminism, functions in the same way as something that is bought and sold. It is a part of the machinations of late capitalism.
Yeah, it fits into the capitalist paradigm. It doesn't disrupt it. At this moment, like, to me, Ebony K. Williams is another representation of the culmination of feminist politics.
Mm-hmm.
The black corporatist woman. Now, I mean, they're going to argue something different, right? They're going to say, well, that's not really where it should be. It kind of took a left turn. But, I mean, by and large, this is what we're left with. We're left with a bunch of women demanding that they have access to lives of leisure and comfort, who are not working to paradigmatically change the social economic structure of Western culture. They're not trying to do that shit.
No, they're not. And they're also
like, where's my money? Where's my nigga with 100,000 who owns the bus?
But they're also frustrated with what comes with those changes. And because they didn't actually anticipate what changes would take place, they just made demands on what they wanted. And so when you start to talk about marriage and family production, they didn't think about how all of those things might be adjusted by this bifurcated one-way access for black women. They didn't think about any of that. But to your earlier point about, what's radical and not, I want to shout out Dub Will in the chat, who said something profound. He said, it's radical when the leaders get deleted. And that's real talk. That's real talk. I had a debate with a BLM person back in 2015, 2016 about this. And she was in tears in the midst of this debate because I was pointing out to her. She kept trying to say that that they were incredibly radical and revolutionary. And I said, the only time I see the police show up in riot gear is when black men attend protests in the same numbers as black women. But when black women attend, mostly by themselves, I don't really see the police showing up like that. And I took it a step further by pointing out a protest that I had joined her on, one that she put together in Southern California. And one of the things I noticed is when, this wasn't, of course, registered with the city or none of that. Just, a bunch of black folk, mostly women, showed up to protest, all out of. And what I noticed is the police that did show up, they didn't arrest people. They didn't harass people. They cordoned off the street so the protests could persist. Even though protesters were shutting down streets where cars had to stop in intersections because they couldn't move. So what I'm saying to you is, if this is radical, I'd never seen a radical movement where the police cordoned off the goddamn streets for the march to go through. Nobody was arrested. Nobody, But when we take it back to some of the figures we were talking about earlier, like the Black Panther Party, you mean to tell me, what happened with Huey and Bobby? And Did the police cordon off the streets for them? You know,
no, they went in, man. They went in and murdered dozens of them kids.
You see what I mean? Or even the brothers that you pointed out out of Ferguson, like Darren Seals. You know what I mean? Did they cordon the streets off for him, or did he end up dead in a car with still no explanation to this day?
And if they weren't killed, they were thrown in prison. Okay,
see that
in jail. You see what I'm saying? So there's death and jail.
And not to mention though, there were some women in the Black Panther Party who also, were bagged and tagged. In the Black Panther Party. Like in a Finney.
She went to jail.
Yeah, she went to jail and then defended, all of the people, that she was, locked up with. So she had co-defendants and was trying to work on, their release, and some of them betrayed her. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, you had like women. I'm not saying that Black women have always been turnkeys and sellouts. That's not what we're saying. Okay? Because I believe that there are some ride or die Black women. But at this point, like, one has to ask the question, is this merely a movement that dovetails white women's movement, which basically is an obstruction to the civil rights bill altogether, or is this something radical? I think it's just, Black women dovetailing white women. That's just kind of imitating their axiology and kind of mimicking, and patterning their so-called radicality after theirs. That's how I perceive it.
And I agree with you. But I am saying that when it comes to BLM, I'm differentiating between the grassroots movement of people and the formal organization that stemmed out of that. I am differentiating because I remember what you said, Gigi, when I first heard of BLM. I didn't even think it was a hashtag at the time. I thought it was just something people were chanting. Because remember, just before it was Black Lives Matter, it was what was it? Don't shoot. It was hands up, don't shoot. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So when I heard BLM for the first time, when I heard Black Lives Matter, it was in the context of a chant at a protest. I didn't know it was an organization, let alone what the politics of the organization was. And my contention is that for a lot of Black folk, their introduction to BLM was similar. We didn't know there was a formal kind of set of edicts about what they stood for, especially in regard to Black males, heterosexual Black males. And you just really didn't know that.
For sure. But let me do this, man. Let me give a shout out to a Mississippi Delta guy. Appreciate that, bro. That's a generous donation, bro. Shout out to him, man. Let's keep it going on this though. Let's get a little more under our belt if we can here. All right.
Its approach extends to Indigenous women and trans women and others fighting for liberation. Our bodies and the metaphorical colors assigned to them, black, white, red, yellow, brown, exist because of Western European and Anglo-American constructs that define and assign financial worth to everything and everyone, placing us in rigid hierarchies. This is the living legacy of colonialism, patriarchy, racism, and capitalism. This is the original identity politics. It is vile, it is violent, it is abhorrent, and this is what Combahee seeks to dismantle. I contend that Combahee ultimately offers us a profoundly liberatory politics of the body. But increasingly I wonder whether that politics can be distorted by what one could call a benevolent essentialism of Black womanhood. An essentialism that presupposes that every Black woman automatically inhabits this politics.
Okay, so I don't know how to make this.
Gigi, can I say something?
Go ahead, man.
This is classic. You guys who are listening, when you get a chance, Google the word romanticism. This is classic romanticism, okay? That is when you're looking back and you're idealizing something and you project all of this. She's very poetic. I'll give her that. She's just very poetic. This is very so sentimental in everything. This is a part of the messianic type of creed. When you take these these statements and the people who made the statements, the people who are connected to statements, you turn them in. This is more messianic talk. And you're just romanticizing a select group from within an oppressed population. And you idealize them and you put them on a pedestal and you give them all this power and all this authority and wisdom and insight. This is romanticism. This is when I wrote this in my dissertation like 20 years ago. I called it the romanticism of the oppressed. This is what Karl Marx did. Karl Marx romanticized the lumpen proletariat. He said, these are the people who are going to bring about the end of capitalism. They are the revolutionaries. We must listen to them. We must take their insights because they are the ones, they have natural insights based on their existential positioning within capitalism.
Yeah, you're exactly right about that. So, I mean, I think, let me break this down in lay terms so that, these people can understand. Like, positionality politics is not something that Black women created. Like, standpoint epistemology really actually was not originated by women at all, period. Okay, even though like Black women like to, lay claim to it to a certain degree, or embodiment, or being able to see things from a specific perspective, whereas others couldn't see it, because one could argue like embedded within Marx or even in Hegel is this kind of viewpoint, right? The idea that there's a subject who's able to see things that other people can't see and to push the Geist forward to culminate in some beneficent teleological or eschatological end. You know what I'm saying? Or there's some end, some benevolent power driving certain subjects to a specific benevolent end. Okay? And so to a certain degree, like Black women have taken that on for themselves. I mean, they basically refer to themselves as the true lumpen proletariat.
I'm going to tell you, you know what the Jamaican scholar Orlando Patterson, he wrote this in, he has a book called The Ordeal of Integration. And he laments what happened to sociology after the 1960s. And he said that sociologists, after Moynihan and everything, they stopped dealing with issues of the family and all this kind of stuff because of this type of romanticism. Because it was assumed that the Black women who were protesting against Moynihan, they had some basic insights into the structure of reality that Moynihan, Du Bois, and Fraser, who came before them, they had some type of insights into the structure of reality that these professional scholars simply did not have.
Right.
And so what Orlando Patterson said, that sociology basically abandoned study of the family and even certain aspects of studying the poor. And he even makes a mockery of it. He says, you can't walk down the street and pick any random poor Black man and treat him as a fundamental expert of what's going on in the hood. Okay? I don't care how close he is to the inner city. I don't care how policed he's been. Yeah, he got some existential insights, things that he could say, okay? But he doesn't have enough analytical and historical know-how or expertise to give you a kind of cogent analysis of what is going on, particularly from a structural perspective. You understand? And you can't assume that this person is objective. You understand? Or this person can see things from multiple perspectives. And basically what he was criticizing is this kind of radical subjectivity. And that's what we have. And that's what a postmodernism is. And that's the problem with postmodernism, because, and we're dealing with this kind of postmodern sensibility, is that you have this kind of radical subjectivity where her truth is the truth. And you can't question it.
And that's why, and that postmodernity is also mixed with a lot of white liberal guilt. So you have Black women who are articulating themselves to be the voice of all groups that are oppressed. And you have people, white liberals in particular, who are not going to publicly dismiss that. right? Because they don't have the standing to do so in terms of identity politics. But at the end of the day, what you find is that black men are on the outside of that conversation now, and can't contribute.
This is how they can position themselves as experts
Yes.
on black men.
Yes.
Okay, this
Yes.
is how Bell Hooks was able to position herself as an expert on black men without having to do any real research or anything like that.
Yes.
This is how someone like a Brittany Cooper, she can say all sorts of things about black men in a during memoir, okay, and talk about her daddy and talk about her uncles, and that just gives her this deep, profound insight into the condition of black men that everybody must listen to.
We have black male scholars that start their analysis of black men with bell hooks. They don't, that's their starting point. I mean, it's ridiculous.
That's crazy. And look, my point about all this is, like this whole concept of, black women are in a position to where they have situated knowledge. I get the concept of situated knowledge, but it does have its own limitations. I mean, just because you have some visceral response to oppression doesn't mean you understand it in all of its facets and all of its complexity, like Dr. Neal was talking earlier. You just don't. And the reason that you don't is, especially without any kind of methodology, right, is that you're a finite being. Your experiences are finite. Okay? And you can only speak to your own experiences, and you can only provide analysis predicated upon your own, hermeneutic capacity, for lack of better terms, your own interpretive capacity. I mean, if you don't have the wherewithal to understand and assess because you haven't learned research methods, or, you're not really a sophisticated person, you haven't educated yourself, and you haven't done much study, what the fuck can you say? I mean, you can come with folk wisdom and common sense, understanding, but that's worth its weight in salt as far as I'm concerned anyway. Like, black women are human beings, and they have finite knowledge about oppression and can only speak to their own experiences, okay? And let's be frank about this, not discounting black women, in the United States, but I mean, black women and men in the United States, one could argue, might not be more oppressed than some women in other parts of the world. Let's just be frank about this. And I'm not trying to discount our own oppression at all, okay? But compare Barbara Ransby in her life and the experiences that she has on a day-to-day basis with, say, for example, some poor-ass black women in a third world country, bro. And I understand that they say that they got solidarity with these ladies conceptually, theoretically, but I mean, the experience of each person is going to bear something different. Like, take, for example, you can even see this in the United States itself, like with a woman like Ebony K. Williams versus a woman say, for example, prior to her, catapultation to success, like Glorilla.
Yeah.
They got two different life experiences.
Yeah.
Two different trajectories, come from two different kind of worlds. Okay? And not to say, that I'm not trying to discount black women's success, but don't act like, don't act like Ebony K. Williams is a fucking freedom fighter, bro. Don't do that to me, man. Please don't try to put that in front of my face and argue as if it's some kind of radical liberatory politics, because I'm not buying it.
But it's interesting to see what black feminism does in that instance, right? Because in one vein, it'll say that Ebony K. Williams has been oppressed. She's had to fight against the patriarchy, and of course, sexist, patriarchal black men to get where she is. And similarly, the Glorillas before fame had to do something similar in their environments. And they'll even go so far as to say, yes, and the African women that are coming here are coming because they were oppressed by African men there. It's an interesting kind of linkage that takes place that, it really sidesteps a lot of particularities historically in order to create this kind of outcome. And they try to develop some sense of solidarity with this imagined kind of framework.
Go ahead.
and it's lazy. It's lazy. It's a very lazy thing. You know, one thing, you know, Ishmael Reed, he did this constantly. You know, whenever they would talk about stuff like IPV and other related things, you know, he said, you know, they don't study other groups. They don't study other populations. You know, it's one thing to not study other populations outside the world, outside the U.S. context. They hardly study other populations within the U.S. context. Okay, I mean,
because they don't have to, because
yeah,
they've already posited themselves as the negative universal subject.
Yeah.
And when you declare that you are the negative universal subject, everything is patterned around you. You become the Black Messiah. You are the Black Messiah. And they speak to this themselves. They know, they have to know that this is a problem. The question is, like, how do you get beyond the problem? One of the ways you get beyond the problem is lean a little bit closer, see. Roses smell like boo-boo. Like, I know you think your shit don't stink. I know you feel like, you know, you're at the bottom of the bottom, okay? But let's just be frank about this shit. You're not the bottom of the bottom. In fact, in many ways, you perpetuate the same kind of oppression that you give voice to eliminate it. But you don't want that to be said, though, because you want to be able to keep the bag while being, you know, apparently revolutionary and all that good stuff. But let me keep pushing, man. Let me press a little more.
Black feminism has a special relationship to us as Black women. The love that it calls for us to have for ourselves in all of our brokenness, hurt, and shame is a balm for the soul. And it invites us to reach beyond the pain, to seize our wholeness, our compassion, our fierce protectiveness, and wholehearted embrace of all of who we are. We may want everyone, and certainly every Black woman, to feel that sense of wholeness, acceptance, and validation. But the politics that it takes to build a world that produces wholeness, acceptance, and validation is not automatically available to everyone. And being born a Black woman isn't enough to get us there. For the profound ways that the statement validates many of our experiences and inspires adherence, it is not saying that all Black women have all the answers simply because we are born Black and female. The Combahee statement includes the sentence, as Black women, we find any type of biological determinism a particularly dangerous and reactionary basis upon which to build a politic. The celebration of Black women, one that is profoundly needed.
I noticed you was doing a lot of in there, so, you know, you want to say something or you want me to keep
Well,
going?
just real briefly, I think the very thing she's talking about, it took place. I mean, the Combahee River Collective, as you pointed out, was written in the early to mid 70s, but I mean, fast forward to the late 80s to now, and I think the very thing she's trying to say, you know, that they were declaring something against is actually taking place. You know, she started talking about how it's not biologically determined, but now we got these questions about, you know, who's the universal negative subject, as you pointed out, and it can't be anything other than a Black male. I mean, than a Black female, right?
Or
Even
a
though
Black
the
trans woman, or somebody that performs as a woman.
Well, I see. Right, I was going to get to that too, because at the end of the day, even in terms of the LGBT dynamic, it's hierarchically valued by those communities, by Black feminist communities, in relation to how close in proximity they are to Black femaleness, right? And of course, Black males, heterosexual Black males, are the furthest away and have the lowest kind of ranking as far as that. So I do see a biological determinism of sorts that plays out in Black feminist logic, and it's interesting to hear that the Combahee River Collective laid out a platform that I think in many ways was subverted by the very people that claim an intellectual lineage with this.
Yeah, and that's the issue. Like, first of all, I just think like the epistemology is problematic with it. First and foremost, because I think in many ways it's an epistemological document, right? It's saying that women have this knowledge about what freedom is and like where they sit in context to it. And so here's what we need to do, predicated upon our situatedness as these kind of beings who stand at the crossroads of multiple forms of oppression. So, but like at the end of the day, the question is, well, it's not even a question, but the statement for me is, you're human just like the rest of us. You're vulnerable just like the rest of us. You can be vulnerable to capitalist seduction and tokenism just like the rest of us. You can get drunk on power and materialism just like the rest of us. Just like black people in the South themselves were people who kept other slaves in line. Like the crackers were not always white folks. Sometimes the crackers who held the whips were black people. Sometimes black men. Okay? But the question is, can a black woman be someone wielding the whip? And I think the answer to the question is yes. Mm-hmm. And even they are going to have to admit this. At some point, I think Barbara Ramsby herself says as much. You know, like I think she makes reference to the police officers in Memphis who killed Tyree Nichols. Is it possible for black people themselves to carry out the functions of a white supremacist social system?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you've got Fannie Willis, who is the district attorney in Fulton County, Georgia, in Atlanta, who is prosecuting the rappers, YSL, and everything like that. And you have to ask the question, you know, apart from whatever crimes they may have actually committed, you got to ask your question. You know, what are the motivations behind that? What has happened? Does she have aspirations of becoming something beyond a district attorney? Does she aspire to be the next Kamala Harris? You understand? Does she have a lust for a certain type of power? Okay. And if it is the case that she does have a lust for power, that means she's no different from anybody else.
And that's, at the end of the day, this is why I say, you know, black people, black men and women both, because they're human, even though humanity has been denied on several fronts or whatever the case may be. I'm not making that kind of argument or claim at the current moment. But what I am saying is, as human beings, we both are vulnerable to vice. That's just, I mean, but according to the it seems like there's an implicit assumption within feminism that women are somehow subjected to evil passively, and the active evil is something that's the pure province of men. That's the source of it. You know, like that's the etiology. You know, like it's like if you were watching some fantasy story, like the evil is coming from a certain area. Like there's a place where it exists and it's able to infect others.
But right? they are also unique victims in that we implicitly are supposed to understand that they get the most of it. You know, they're on the receiving end of the most evil.
And that, you know, it's just false. But you know, let's keep pushing through this.
Well-deserved can sometimes evolve into a coronation, an anointing, if you will, of all things black and female. If we do so, I wonder if we risk equating black and female with black feminist. And when we do so, we may risk losing sight of the extraordinary study, sacrifice, struggle, and strategy that led to the creation of this extraordinary statement. We risk making the politics described in the statement automatic. We risk relating to it as our birthright. We risk reducing and even eliminating the very dynamics that gave birth to the statement. We seize the diamond, but ignore the pressurized conditions that produced it. Black womanhood, when assaulted by racism, sexism, classism, ableism, and heterosexism, can be broken into 1,000 shards of glass. But Combahee forged a new way to articulate our value and our worthiness, to define a new politics, a new way that prioritized us and honored us. They recognized the diamonds that we are. When we are too quick to label the Black female body as automatically equivalent to a Black feminist politic, we may fail to do the hard work of building accountability. In the statement, they also say we believe in collective process and a non-hierarchical distribution of power within our own group, and in our vision of revolutionary society. We are committed to a continual examination of our politics as they develop through criticism and self-criticism, and as an essential aspect of our practice. So Black feminism is ultimately a political identity. That's what Barbara taught me, and if I have this wrong, you'll certainly let me know. It's a political identity where history, study, and experience matters. It is an invitation to honoring and naming a distinct tradition and lineage and appreciating it. One that sees the wisdom of our bodies as a path to liberation, not of bondage and shame. Combahee rescues us from a false universality that invisibilizes the history of institutions and their practices and the ways that they were built to advantage a small minority at the expense of the many. It offers an invitation to rebuild everything from scratch. There are no generic individuals, and nothing is simply for the best. It ends the invisibility upon which whiteness thrives and unmasks the web of relationships, norms, practices, rules, and histories that are built into our institutions. Disembodied individualism and its wise neutrality are unmasked as systems of privilege and power ripe for remaking. What I love most about the Combahee statement is that it offers a politics of the body that is profoundly liberatory. The statement is a meditation on interlocking oppressions, the core idea at the heart of intersectionality. It does so because it ultimately is pointing us to a pathway of interlocking freedoms. It is not a mirror of white supremacy that simply places Black female supremacy in its stead. It is a politics of the body that seeks to liberate by unlocking our vision to see the world differently and challenging us to build a new world that works for all of us. Thank you.
I'm so pleased to be with you.
Now look, I'm not gonna say anything about that other than what you said earlier, Dr. Neal. Where's the beef, man?
Hold on. You know, as she was closing, do you know who I thought about as she was closing?
Who is that?
I thought about Derek Bell. Derek Bell has a book that came out in 1987, and the title of that book is "We Are Still Not Saved." Okay, and all you got to do is fast forward into 2023. I've been going over Derek Bell, and we are still not saved, and faces at the bottom of the well. And I'm like, all that she says, it sounds so lofty and cosmic, and it is so utopian. And it's like, here we are. We haven't been liberated by these women. Okay? And no one wants to attach themselves to white people. Why isn't, I said this earlier, if they got the secret sauce, why is it that the white people, the trans, the LGBTQ, the white feminists, why haven't them, and they're closer to power than anybody else, why haven't they just pushed all this stuff forward and transported us into this new heaven and new earth?
Because look, at the end of the day, man, look, all I can tell you is, to me, I said it before, I'll say it again before we move to Barbara Smith. But Black feminism just kind of dovetails, and I think Dr. Johnson, Hassan basically, says it, pretty simply, like, it's about resources, man. There's an economic driving force behind this shit. And Dr. Curry says this as well. Like there is an economic driving force that animates most of this political theory. It's their entry point into securing what white women, they get some modicum of what white women were able to get for themselves. Now one can argue they may have started off more radical. But I mean, shit. Like, how many black people started off radical as hell, and then they end up like milk toast, or somewhat real comfortable.
When you sign that Faustian bargain, you know.
And not to say, look, I'm not saying that black folks shouldn't get their paper. I'm not saying that black folks should, be destitute. That they should always be, willing to throw everything and put everything on the line at every second. But I'm just saying, like, don't pretend to be involved in the most radical politics of all times. But like, you live like a white middle class life.
I mean, you remember? Eldridge Cleaver was a Panther, and he evolved into a Reaganite. Remember that? And he owned it. That's the thing. Eldridge Cleaver, and I give him props. Eldridge Cleaver, he repudiated his radical past. Well, and he said he became a Republican. He became a born again Christian.
And that's crazy. But I mean, at least he stayed true to like what he felt and what he thought.
I was gonna say, Dr. Neal just did a show on Clarence Thomas too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Clarence Thomas. And different. Here's the thing, and that's why I got to respect Clarence Thomas. And the reason why I got to respect him is because he's clear. He's been clear about his transformations. He's clear about his politics. He publicly repudiated old positions. We call him Uncle Tom, but you got a whole bunch of these black folks, like the people that we're talking about right now. They're not that different from Clarence Thomas. They're not that different from him. What separates them from Clarence Thomas is that Clarence Thomas is honest about who he is.
So let's push through a little bit more of this. We got like maybe 7-8 minutes of this to look at, unless you want to disband here, and then
no, keep going. It's good with Barbara Smith. Yeah.
Today and all during this week and this afternoon, of course, we're talking about one of my favorite subjects, which is Black feminism. I'm interested, and I want to thank everyone for wonderful presentations. I think you can see why I picked Alethea to edit this book. We barely knew each other, and she'd asked me to speak in her class, and I think it was some kind of exchange. If you did this, I'll do that.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it was.
Lawrence Steinem and pay equity.
Right, exactly. So the thing is that happened, and so then I asked Alethea, and I mean, it's like, I don't know you from a hole in the wall, but yeah, I'll do it. And it's so wonderful to meet you and see you too. And I particularly perked up when you said that you studied with Sonia Sanchez, because for Jamie, who's out there, yeah, I know Sonia too. Okay? Jamie Swift, let's see, James Madison University, Black Women Radicals, a wonderful online community and social media presence. She's impressed by all the people I knew, and no one knew. Well, I know you now, so sorry to embarrass you.
Yes.
But I love hearing about Shirley Chisholm. She was actually at the National Black Feminist Organization first Eastern Regional Conference, which happened in New York City in 1973, which my sister Beverly and I attended. So just a few words about the state of Black feminism now. The thing that made the Combahee River Collective unique, and this is what I say often when I talk about it, is the fact that we had a socialist, anti-capitalist, material, political analysis and practice. We were concerned about what was actually happening on the ground to real live people. And that was distinctive because it wasn't just nice ideas about would it be nice if Black women were free? Or would it be nice if people respected women of color? Or wouldn't it be nice? It's like, what are we going to do about it? The culmination, I feel, in many ways of our organizing was when 12 Black women were murdered in Boston during a 4-month period in 1979. And all the things that we had put together before then, the statement at that point had been written. We brought together and really brought together in a serious way to bring people from all over an incredibly divided city, which is racist Boston, racist to this day. We brought together people who had never worked with each other previously, and those coalitions stayed at a time when people really did not know how to even think about this horror of these murders, and they were not serial murders. So more than one man took it in his mind to say, I think I'm going to off a black woman. I think I'm going to kill a black woman just for the hell of it. And it was a time of incredible terror for us, but we did everything that we could. Perfect example of material conditions. What was the situation? Women of color in Boston, and that included Latina, Latinx women, were under siege, and we wanted to do something about it and wanted to explain that there was a way to deal with it besides making sure you go everywhere we can, because that was the solution that was being put out by people in the black community who were political, who were concerned, but of course had no connection to feminism. I want to say a couple of words about identity politics. The real truth about what identity politics is that.
Oh man, it just, hold on, man. My bad, man. I didn't mean it, just somehow went off.
Racist Boston, racist to this day. We brought together people who had never worked with each other previously, and those coalitions stayed at a time when people really did not know how to even think about this horror of these murders, and they were not serial murders. So more than one man took it in his mind to say, I think I'm going to off a black woman. I think I'm going to kill a black woman just for the hell of it.
Now, let me stop there, right? This is the unique thing about this, right? So I'm assuming that, like, the reason that these black women were killed were related to domestic violence instances. I don't know. I don't know with any degree of certainty, but I'm pretty sure that a large portion of these deaths has something to do with intimate partner homicide, okay? Of these 11 black women in Boston. But what we do know is that the time that this work was done, the same time this work was done, the largest demographic that was suffering from intimate partner homicide were black men. From what I think it's 1974 to 1985 or 86 or something like that. The biggest victims of intimate partner homicide were black men.
Shout out to the man not.
And the question, like the question is, well, like, why was this happening? Why was it occurring? But at the same time that this was happening, and I think, Dr. Curry points this out as well, like the Duluth model of domestic violence was authored in 83. The first paper on intersectionality was done in 89. The Combahee River Collective work was done in 77. So at the same time that these women were arguing that men are, killing women, why was it the case that black women were killing their husbands? More so than black husbands were killing their black wives. Why? And the question is, nobody has an answer for it. There is no answer for it. And to this day, we don't have an answer at all. Like, what is the cause? Well, I think, Curry would say probably something like socioeconomic background, education, substance abuse, things of this nature. I think those are the kind of correlates that he would use to try to explain the prominence of such phenomena. And then also connected to it, I think he would probably say the expendability of black male life. Unique black male vulnerability. I think he would say something about it like, nobody gives a fuck if a nigga dies. I mean, it's expected that a nigga dies. And nobody has a problem with using like the modern mechanisms to make niggas die. Well, especially like if your wife or your girlfriend is mad at you, she'll use all of the mechanisms in place to ensure that your death becomes a possibility. to let you know where you stand in relation to her, related to, you know, the proximity that you have to death versus the proximity that she has to death.
So this happened 40 years ago, right? And so my question is, okay, in 40 years, there are no additional details about the murders of these individuals. Was anyone arrested? Was there any investigations? What came about of it? You know what I'm saying? You know, you did a video when she had a conversation with Ishmael Reed when she brought this up, you know, 30 years ago.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
And I can show it to you. I can show it to you. Let me see if I can find this. Let me see if it'll play. What I don't want to do is lose the place where I'm at, but I can get back. It's 1854.
But
yeah, it's not gonna play it. So I gotta. Actually, I could play it if I go to my main scene and come back to this. So let me go.
It's like, you know, they have these Boko Haram narratives, and can y'all hear me?
Yeah, I can hear.
Yeah. So they have these Boko Haram, Al Qaeda terrorist narratives, and I find it interesting that there's no curiosity about the dynamics of, you know, what went down. You know what I mean? I mean, everybody. I mean, I'm gonna say everybody, but you know, hell, in another part of the world, northern Nigeria. All right, those guys went into those villages. They killed the boys. They took the girls and turned them into sex slaves and concubines and everything else. And they did that under the auspices of how they understood their version of Islam. Okay, and so there was so that was clear. And I'm like, there seems to be it's deliberate omission, or you have no curiosity. There's no need to investigate. It's just, okay, we're just gonna say 12 women were killed in Boston. They were not killed by one person, and that's it.
Well, yeah, I think it's interesting when, you know, when we look at what feminists did with Boko Haram, the very narrative, you know, of it just became a gender issue only in the context of girls, but they killed boys or put them into, it forced them into militant service. So the experience of boys got completely wiped out. And I know that's tangential to what you were saying, but I just found it interesting. And I mainly found it interesting because I'm pondering Black feminism in the context of this discussion and this time period that we're looking at in the early to mid 70s, because this is the same time, roughly speaking, that we see a rise in Black feminists, well, through the 80s especially, a rise in Black feminists incorporating the subculture of violence theory that Curry talks about all the time, where they invest in the most stereotypical perspectives on Black men to better align themselves with the mainstream, and particularly white women. And this is also the same time period where we see, well, the gender war has many starts, but a serious kind of starting point for a certain set of talking points in regard to Black women and toward Black men in regard to, you know, the inception of the gender war. So I find it interesting that these things are coming out at roughly the same time period, you know, as what Gigi just pointed out with, you know, this whole issue of Black men being killed in domestic situations. These things are all occurring at roughly the same time. The villainization of Black men, the start of the gender war, you know, all of this stuff is happening at the same time.
And even to this day, like, one can argue, okay, statistically, it might be that like more women today, like Black women, are being killed by their husbands than the other way around. I know you got the data on this, Doc Hassan. I know you got this data somewhere, but it's not that statistically different. Like, I mean, like from year to year, it's not like it's like just like thousands of women being killed more so than men.
No, it's a few hundred, and there's the number of men are not far behind. But, you know, when you add them all together against the population of 40-something million, it's nominal. Like, as a sociologist friend of mine said once, you got a better chance of being struck by lightning than you do being killed by your significant other. It is what it is.
Yeah,
But
so,
again, this is about resources. So if they can make this out to be, the equivalent of what white women have been complaining about in relation to white men, then they'll do it without actually citing any numbers. When you hear people focus so much on rates and not numbers, like something Dr. Neal was saying earlier about how they're trying to use prison and incarceration to highlight Black women's struggles in the situations, it's like, okay. So, but the way they do it is they talk about the rates of Black women. They don't talk about the raw numbers because it would dismantle the argument.
I was looking right now. I was looking for that chart that you gave me a long time ago. It might take too much time for me to actually dig and find it, but let me get back to this video now.
Said
18. I'm gonna start it right here.
making sure you go everywhere we can, because that was the solution that was being put out by people in the Black community who were political, who were concerned, but of course had no connection to feminism. I want to say a couple of words about identity politics. The real truth about what identity politics is that at a time when Black women were not allowed to create their own political agendas, much like was reflected in Professor Fraser's presentation when he talked about Shirley Chisholm running for president. At a time when we were not allowed to come up with our own political agendas, we said that we had a right to formulate them and to act on them, much as Professor Jones talked about the politics of the body.
Okay, you got something you want to say there?
She's describing the political moment where Black women sought to be their own separate entity. The political moment. We can talk about the social moment, as a different, slightly different birth date, but she's talking about the political moment where Black women saw themselves as a separate political entity. So when you get to Ice Cube and the Cocktails with Queens, and he's making a proposal for Black America, and they say there's nothing here for Black women, even though he didn't write anything for Black men either. He actually didn't address gender. They argued they needed something particular to them. This is the birthplace of this new era of this in the latter part of the 20th century, and she's pointing to it.
And let me just add that she is stating a patent lie about Black women not being allowed to articulate. And this is a dominant narrative, not being allowed a particular viewpoint. Okay, bro. I mean,
I gotta laugh. Says you. That's a flat out lie.
Like they had somebody finally gave them permission to talk. Are you serious?
Right.
Are you serious?
Right.
Okay. Have you seen? Have you guys? Do y'all know who Fannie Lou Hamer was?
Oh man, Fannie Lou Hamer was a soldier.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know? I mean, have you seen the classic oration that she did? Before the Democratic Committee, 1967. You know what I'm saying? Nobody had to give her permission to talk. And there were a whole bunch of people. Ella Baker, nobody gave Ella Baker. Ella Baker was talking. I mean, there are so many women that people don't even know about. Mary McLeod Bethune. I mean, all the women who were part of the civil rights. She's gonna start talking about some people who were her role models soon. But there's this patent lie that somehow or another Black women have been silenced all the way up to like 1974, and then they finally opened their mouths. This is nonsense. Black women have always talked. They've always said something. This is just flat out false.
Mm-hmm.
But what marks the difference though is now they're arguing purely for their own benefit.
Right.
They don't see themselves as, this is the odd thing about this document, right? It pretends that by them doing what's in their individual interest, that it leads to a collective benefit, a net gain for everybody else. That's the trickery related to all of this. Namely, that what's in their best interest is going to lead to everybody else's interest.
But they don't want to disassociate wholly. They want to keep one foot in each camp, right? You have a foot in the black camp, you got a foot in the Black women's camp, and that way, if there's anything beneficial, they can easily shift over to one or the other. But you can't, right? The Black women's camp is solely for Black women. So there's this kind of this flat blackness that takes place with them, where it's convenient. Their identitarian politics shift with the moment as it benefits them. But the more they can secure for just Black women, the more they'll shift into that camp, and that's what they're aiming for.
Let's keep going. Because we're almost at the end of it.
People who were like us, who identified as female at birth and who were Black at birth, we had a right to make some decisions and decide what we needed to do to go forward. We were not separatists. We believed deeply in coalitions, and that's another thing that characterized the Black feminism.
Boy, where is it?
My day, back in the day. We were not a self-help cult. We were not promising people that everything was going to be all right because they got involved in Black feminism. Far from it.
I don't understand that. Explain to me how that squares up with the idea that if Black women were free, everybody else would be free, but then it departs from it at this juncture. I don't get it, but okay, well.
Because things have changed and because it's been such a concerted effort on the part of the ruling class and the powers that be to undermine all of the things that we put in place through struggle in the middle part, in the mid and latter part of the 20th century. They had an agenda, and with the fall of Roe last year, you can see that they've been very effective with their agenda. But as I said, in the face of all of that, we kind of draw in upon ourselves, perhaps. We don't have the role models. When I was growing up, who were my role models? Gloria Richardson, Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Fannie Lou Hamer, who I actually met. Yeah, another person. I'm doing this. I'm very wrong. You'll find it out if you didn't stay any or spend any time with me. But the thing is, these were the people who we looked up to. The Little Rock Nine, high school students. They were in high school when I was in junior high, and they were as courageous as any people have ever been. So those are the people who inspired us. We didn't think it could be fixed. We just knew too much about how the system worked from our own direct experiences and that of our family to think that there was a quick fix. And
let me just say the stuff right there. And so basically, all these people that she named, and I do this in my book, belong to a tradition of linked fates.
Mm-hmm.
These people inspired me. They were fighting for all Black people. They weren't just fighting for Black men. They were fighting for everybody. So what happens is after Combahee, you have the separation. It ain't everybody. It's no longer a linked fate tradition. And so as the decades, move on gradually, they move further and further away from the Black majority. And this idea that everything just, they were just co-opted by the dominant class, white ruling class, and all this kind of stuff, you got to really question that. They voluntarily accepted the program. Yep. They didn't buck against it. They accepted it.
Yeah.
They accepted the accoutrements of upper middle class life. Just keep it a buck.
But to do that, they had to fracture something. I mean, here's the thing about the civil rights movement. I think Dr. Neal is kind of pointing this out as well. The civil rights movement was the last mass Black movement I saw where people advocated for Blackness across class, across gender, across sexuality, right? Haven't seen that. And if we look at the transition from that movement to the rise of BLM, we can see the shift. The Faustian bargain I talked about, which is what we're really getting at, right? They had to shatter that kind of sense of linked fates, Blackness, to achieve something solely for themselves. And that's where we are right now.
But I will say this. There are movements that exist outside of the academy, whether you like them or not, or whether you think that they're on the right mark or not. that are trying to do more than what these women are doing. Like you got like B1, you got ADOS, you got FBA, you know, you got all of these different kind of movements that I don't think necessarily play into feminist politics. But the question is whether or not they're going to, you know, be able to gain any traction. Because like black feminism is institutionalized. Like, let's just keep it a buck.
And even reparations, all the movements that you name, A1, B1, ADOS, the other broader reparations movement, that's the one thing they have in common: linked fates. Linked fates. It ain't perfect, as you said. It ain't perfect, but it's not reduced to gender. It's not reduced to the kind of reductions that you have now.
But here's my problem with various movements in that regard. To me, if you actively sidestep criticizing feminism and or women that operate in that space and seek to undermine, right, the types of organizations and the even the not just the organizing, but the coming, it's another component to it that's slipping my mind at the moment. But anyway, even those who are trying to undermine those ventures from those feminist standpoints, there's a problem, right? I have brothers who reached out to me to tell me what was going on behind the scenes with some of those ADOS discussions regarding feminism, but feminism is not called out rightly. I can't speak to B1, but I'm simply saying, as far as these kinds of movements, to me, in the black community, if you're not going to make a principled stance or statement about what actually, how feminism in and of itself, because again, the Ice Cube effect we're talking about, I think it impacts every movement we have in the black community. It's just a question of whether or not we're going to publicly acknowledge that it does. And my question is, if you don't say anything about it, then where do you position yourself?
Now, here's the other thing that she says, and I suspect Gigi is going to tap into it. She talks about, she said emphatically, we didn't intend this to become feminism, that is black feminism, a self-help cult. Or we did not intend this to become some enterprise that's oriented towards individual success, i.e. Ebony K. Williams. Now, the self-help cult, I don't know if you guys have seen fine Janelle Monáe. She got a new video out. She got this.
Yeah.
It's a lesbian love fest, and that's what she's talking about. I mean, they think that's politics. You got a video full of women at a pool party, and she's kissing on these women and rubbing on them and all this kind of stuff. And you got maybe two men in the video, and everybody has all the rage about it. They got over 1 million views so far, you know. And she's pansexual and everything else. And this for them is politics. And I would say this is the dominant expression of feminism that we see in popular culture. It's a self-help code. You know, I was talking about wellness and all that kind of stuff, and self-care, and, you know, getting away from black men. That's where they are.
Yeah, and it's about, in the words of FD Signifier, it's some girl boss shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, how do you, you know, to me, it's like the equivalent of the law of attraction and some sort of strange connection to, you know, like the gospel of prosperity. Like the intertwining of both of those kind of, you know, new age movements, to where it's like, okay, I can zone into this sentiment and move myself up the economic ladder, or, like you said, attain wellness and a sense of happiness by purging myself and, you know, truncating myself away from these niggas, the dusties, the nakers, the didn't do nothings, you know, like the abusers, the boogeymen. And it's become a neoliberal enterprise, man. And that's the problem I have with it. It's like, what happened to the... I'm not saying that it didn't have any potentiality in the beginning. It more than likely it could have. If it would have stayed on its course and it would have abided by its own principles. Even, like, I disagree with some of them, but, like, if it would have stayed fast with the whole concept that, like, okay, we don't believe in separatism. If it would have just adhered to that, like, we don't believe in fucking separatism. Like, white women want to separate from their men. We don't believe we should be doing that. We have to form coalitions with black men. We struggle with them, but they're not struggling with us. They're struggling to get the bag and to create the stereotype and caricaturizations about us so they can get the bag. That's the issue we got with this shit. It throws us under the bus in order for them to be included in, you know, like the Hunger Games, like the capital city. Now you get to be a part of the capital city after stabbing us in the back. And, you know, basically characterizing yourselves as like these hapless victims, where it's like we just like Mr. and shit, just brutalizing every black woman in sight, doing like whatever we can to be as nasty and evil as we can to them. Because we want to imitate white dudes. We want to be just like white guys. And not like the best kind of white guys, but like, you know, those white guys that are fat and, you know, wear wife beaters and drink a lot of beer and shit, loser black guys who like to slap the shit out of women just haphazardly or something. Those are the kind of guys we are. I mean, but like the reality is a lot different than the presentation of like, you know, categories of womanness and blackness and hetero or homo and, you know, the world is more complex than that, man. Like you got like, so there's no trans women who are doing dastardly shit out here? There's no black women doing some fucked up shit out here? Like, I mean, even like they have to agree, they have to consent to this. They have to acknowledge that this shit has become to some degree essentialist. Even if they say it's not, I mean, at least they're educated enough to know that it can't be regarded as essentialist all across the board. Like, oh, black women are this just because they're that. Mm-hmm. But the lay public doesn't think about this shit like that. They haven't studied any of this shit. Even like she's gonna, like this Barbara Smith woman she's going to admit that most motherfuckers are getting their understanding of black feminism from the internet, social media. Yeah. They're not reading books. Yeah. They're not reading articles. Half of these motherfuckers, I guarantee you, half of these people, man, these black women out here, like ride or die, like especially online, like social media channel women and shit. I guarantee you they ain't even read the fucking Combahee River Collective, dude.
I think that's why black male studies, for example, and Tommy Curry in particular, have been so impactful, because part of the problem for feminism in particular, black feminism, is that Tommy read, just like we have. We read their works. Their works were required reading for those of us going through graduate school, right? But not only do those women not read, say, black male studies, but they haven't even read their own work. So when we start, you know, really criticizing and critiquing what they're talking about, we can go back to the Combahee River Collective and before that. But a lot of them don't feel like they have to. And I'm telling you this as somebody who has, you know, black feminist students graduating with a confidence in what they believe in, but couldn't tell you about really too many works that they bothered to read through.
Man, they ain't read Zami, Audre Lorde. They ain't read Bell Hooks. They ain't read nothing. They ain't read... They ain't read Jane Mainsbridge. They ain't read nothing. They ain't read Judith Butler. No. They ain't read none of this shit, but they know it all though.
They watched The Color Purple. That's what they did. They watched The Color Purple.
Noli Rooks, who teaches, I can't think what school she's at, but she used to put Facebook posts lamenting the fact that her female students did not want to read the stuff that she was putting in front of them. Okay, and this is just not so long. We ain't talking about the last century. We're talking about the last 5 years. Okay, they don't want to read it. Yeah, I had a hard time getting my students to read the feminist stuff I had in my class. So I know.
You know, the point is, bro, like to know this shit, you have to read it. And to claim that you're expert in it, or like, you know, that this is what you are, this is what you profess to be, you need to have at least some sort of cursory knowledge of it. I mean, at least like some kind of knowledge related to it. Like, but you got people who will tell you that they understand it, but they've never read, you know, like Emily Martin. They ain't never read, you know, Nancy Tuana. They never read, you know, Pizan. You know, they never read this shit. They don't know anything about it for real.
But, you know, I think when you're in a context where your social bubble, your academic bubble, your professional bubble after graduating, if those bubbles are all comprised of the same demographic, I can see where a kind of entitled, accepted ignorance, it works. Because as far as you're concerned, it's self-reinforcing. You know, you don't have to read anything because you just kind of implicitly know. And that works in all of those spaces where you see yourself reflected. You know what I mean? It only becomes a problem when you have another demographic outside of your chosen bubble that has some criticism. And that's where it creates this kind of, you know, this nervous frustration and a lack of willingness to debate with those people, because at the end of the day, they don't have the same assumptions. They don't function the same way. And I think that's what's happening. Because when you look at Black folk in the academy, especially from students to faculty to hell, even staff, it's majority female. They socialize with each other. They even create businesses solely for each other to be their primary, you know, customer. It's gotten to that point.
It's like they're an insulated ethno state. You know what I'm saying? That has no contact with any other part of the world. You know what I mean? And you know, it's the problem of insularity.
Yes.
You know, that is just it is pervasive, it is deep, and as Dr. J said, it is reinforced. They live on an island, small island in the Caribbean. Okay.
But this is where the shit hits the fan, though. You come out of that bubble one day and you turn on Green Gorilla, or you turn on Dr. Neil, or somebody told you to listen to Kevin Samuels for the first time. Imagine the interruption that takes place when you hear these voices with no context for the first time. The natural response is going to be to recoil back into the familiar.
It's the patriarchy. It's misogyny. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, like, look, to be perfectly honest, man, look, I think Kevin Samuels actually loved Black women.
Oh, yeah, he did.
I think so, too.
I think he really, because you should see how he talked to Black men.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, how big is your dick, nigga? You got a little dick or big dick? You're fat. Lose some weight.
Yeah.
You look dusty and crusty. Get some clothes in your life. I mean, this is how I used to talk to guys.
Wash your ass.
Yeah, wash up the crack of your ass. This is the same. I mean, I'm not trying to venerate this dude to the point where he's a saint or something like that. But all I'm saying is, I personally, the patience that he had with Black women, he would talk to them night after night, bro.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Listen, I think that we have to say emphatically, at least that's what I'm doing, that he was not a misogynist. And that women who make that claim, we have to refute it. And this is the thing I got into. And again, they cut that video up when I was on Revolt TV. But, you know, my defense was basically that, you know, and I didn't come out and say that he was not a misogynist. We didn't have enough time to get into that. But in a different kind of way, no, this man was not. He was not a hater of Black women in particular, or women in general. He didn't hate them. You know.
I know for a fact. What Kevin Samuels did, in my humble opinion, he didn't pedestalize women, right? He treated them like, okay, I'm going to hear you, you're going to hear me. I'm not going to allow you to pander to you and play the queen game with you, where you can shut me off because you're a woman, and then you get to faint and act like you're just hurting, all of this kind of shit. He said, look, I'm going to hold you accountable.
But, you know, I think what a lot of them miss, too, is that Kevin was in direct conversation with black women. Notice everything that they hated about him was a direct response to the things we've been hearing since the 1980s that black women wanted from black men. I mean, essentially, in the 80s, what we were introduced to without the same language was that black women wanted high-value men. So now we're at a point where, you know, everybody's decrying high value. It's this, it's that. Kevin, by extension, is this or that because he supported it. But really, he was in conversation with women. Women demanded high-value men. They didn't use that terminology, but that's what they demanded. And Kevin simply said, okay, well, if that's what you want, did you ever stop to wonder what he wants? And is there a reason you don't have one? He engaged them in a conversation about something they initiated. That's the missing piece to me. And that's why when I watched Dr. Neal on that broadcast about Kevin, I took such issue with it. And I wrote it in the comments to the video he posted. I said, this is ridiculous. They act like men who are frustrated and having these conversations now just came out the blue with no context and just decided to wage war against women. But we're showing tonight, this is one of the beginnings of the gender war that nobody wants to acknowledge. This is what helped produce 10, 15 years later, the niggas ain't shit and that I need to do with six figures kind of rhetoric. And then a few decades after that, men saying, okay, well, if that's what you want, what are you actually doing for? You know, that whole conversation started with black women.
Hey, look, so here's this guy asking the question. I don't know if it's a guy or a girl, but I don't understand why there's an issue with specialization, that is feminist studies and masculinist studies. Look, at the end of the day, this is what feminism does. Feminism says that there's evil in the world that needs to be eliminated. And that there's a source of the evil, namely men.
Cross race, yep.
The patriarchy.
Yep.
Now, black male studies, if masculinist studies, is not making the claim that women are evil.
Right.
There's a difference. It's not using Marxist, thesis, antithesis in order to make a statement about the trajectory of politics. And it's not an eschatological politics coming from the masculinist side. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that there's never been, eras in history where there haven't been, excesses with men, dominating women or some shit like that. I ain't even saying that. But feminism is going too far across the line in relation to, determining what the source of pathology is in contemporary society. If it is the case that feminist philosophy was it had fidelity to social scientific methodology, we probably wouldn't even be here. But because it does not, and is making a whole bunch of assertions, many of which have been debunked by the women themselves. These women are coming out, before they die, they'll do something like Ellen Pence did. Well, we were using implicit bias in order to make the postulation or to put forth the notion that men are beating up women in the household because, they want to control them or want to have power over them. When we look at the data, it doesn't demonstrate that that's the fact. Although we were insistent that it is. But I mean, the point is, you got philosophy professors and English professors making matter-of-fact statements about the world, and nobody's challenging them because why? Because they're women. And the last thing a motherfucker wants to do is to be confronted with a woman, crying or complaining or bitching or something like that. So the first thing men do is they try to retreat from the shit. Let me step away from this shit. This shit is crazy.
And just think, you had sociologists, you had trained empiricists bowing down to that stuff all through the 70s, 80s, 90s, up to today.
And the point is, here's the point. It's not that we're just saying that black feminism demonizes black men, because feminism in general demonizes men. Let's get that straight. Let's just get that out of the fucking, off the ground.
Yep.
It is what it is.
Yep.
How else can like radical feminists say shit like kill men now, ask me how?
Yeah.
Kill men now, ask me how.
Listen, Google. All you guys, just Google I hate men and see what comes up when you Google it.
Like, I mean,
or books on the shelves in bookstores about how to kill a man. I mean, this is shit that they're publishing.
Read Towards a Feminist Theory of the State with Catherine McKinnon. Read Andrea Dworkin's books. And see what, I mean, these are dominant feminists, and they basically say that the source of all violence and pathology is connected to the patriarchy and men who want to just brutalize and beat up and hurt women. Like, there's no nuance to any of this, no complexity. No, it's not an actual account of everyone's experiences, but it's an account of their own experiences.
So let me ask you a question, Gigi. If they're going to argue that there's a biological address to evil, but at the same time, they themselves have no essentialism and there's no biological determinism in feminism, does that hold up under scrutiny?
It's contradictory.
Mm-hmm.
It's contradictory. All I've ever said, and for some reason it's controversial, and it seems like I'm complaining. To me, I'm just stating the facts, and it's obvious. Men had the capacity to exhibit virtue or vice.
Mm-hmm.
Women had the capacity to exhibit virtue or vice. It's just that fucking simple. Now, we can talk about systems and structures and narratives and discourses that privilege certain demographics over others and all of this kind of shit. But by and large, let's just be frank about this shit. Life ain't been a crystal stair for black folks across the board. It definitely ain't been a crystal stair for black men. And they know this shit, man. You ain't got to be a genius. You don't have to go to graduate school to understand that niggas is getting the short end of the stick.
Dude,
you don't have to. All I'm saying, you don't have to be a fucking rocket scientist. You don't have to have a PhD in philosophy to understand that the vast majority of black folks that's killed by the police are black men. You don't have to have a degree in history to understand that principally when war or genocide takes place, they typically subdue the male population.
But somehow it's offensive to mention that that's actually the case.
To even discuss it or to say anything about, but see, then they start talking about invisibility, or they'll talk about the ways in which they're looked over, they're glossed over, how they're not centered. And I get it. Look, I'm not saying that they shouldn't have a moment, but like of reflection, a moment to center, but like to stay centered all the time, that's self-centered. That's too much. We call self-centeredness narcissism if it goes overboard. I'm not saying have no love for self, but like at the end of the day, like the reality is, and I think, I forget what brother it was in the manosphere who said this. It was a panelist who said it, or somebody in the chat. We are inextricably connected whether we fucking like it or not. Because the last time I checked, they haven't fixed the way to like have spontaneous, like creation, or like they ain't no like artificial wombs yet. And if they are, it's still too expensive to make one viable. So if in order to get kids, you still need a man and a woman, right?
Yeah. Look at the brat. Look at the brat. The brat and her wife.
They still needed a man that had to go find some sperm somewhere.
The brat.
This is why I support the empirical push in Black male studies. We're not basing arguments on how we feel about Black men representation, whatever. It's based on what is measurably observable. And we're not making the claim that black men are the universal negative subject, but we are pointing out in terms of what can be observed that black men find themselves on the bottom of a series of lists. And we're talking about those things specifically. We're not making a general argument that's somehow supposed to propel us into the universal. It's an interesting dynamic, but that's where it's gotten to. And that's one of the reasons I appreciated Curry's push toward empiricism, because we have to actually have a standard beyond stereotype and conjecture.
And something beyond philosophy. Because look, who better than philosophers to know the weaknesses inherent in philosophy? Mm-hmm. Especially like somebody who's studying black folks. Like black folks don't have time to just talk about ideas and shit. We're getting killed out here. We're being subjected to poverty and marginalization. So, you know, like conjecturing all fucking day, it ain't gonna work. And plus there's a history and tradition of black scholarship that transcends philosophy, that moves outside of the context of mere philosophy. There's other people doing it, doing liberatory work for black folks or about black folks, or doing study of and about black folks that moves beyond the realm of the philosophical. Plus, let's face it, philosophy is a domain of a lot of white racists.
And that's why it's funny. And that's why Du Bois didn't get his PhD in philosophy. And that's why Du Bois did his work.
Here's the thing. So here's the thing. Have you read any feminist philosophy?
No, of course not.
It doesn't even have to be philosophy.
Have you read any feminist theory? Have you read any of this shit? This is the thing that fucks me up. Why would you ask a question like this? You should know the answer to the question already. Ask me if Bell Hooks has empirical data within her work. Ask me if Kimberly Crenshaw's research methodology is based upon an empirical model. Ask me if the work of Ellen Pence is predicated upon an empirical model. You should know the fucking answer. But the point is, you have to do the education yourself sometimes. You can't wait for me to educate you. Educate yourself.
And they're not going to do it. Here's the fundamental problem. They're not going to do it because they have not been, their ignorance has been protected. Their ignorance has been protected. They've been protected from scrutiny, high level of criticism. And that's why they're so sensitive to criticism, you know, because they have not been criticized. They have not been evaluated. They've been allowed to just say whatever they think is truth and what is right and just and so on and so forth. They have not been held to any real mechanism of evaluation, no checks and balances, no argumentation, debate. They hardly debate amongst themselves.
Yeah. No,
and look, I don't have an issue with women being able to say anything they want. But like in the academy, if you say something, you have to be subjected to criticism to some degree, even to get something published. You should be. But I mean, there have been guys who've done tests on like publishability in certain fields, and they wrote quack papers. They wrote some bullshit papers. They wrote papers that they were fucking absurd. Like one of the papers was about the sexual, like raping at dog parks or some bullshit like that. Doggy rape at a fucking, like a shit park with a dog park. And they just use like the words like heteronormative shit like that in the context of a dog park paper.
No, hold on. And I'm gonna have to roll soon, but I got an email because I'm part of the Ford Foundation listserv because I won a Ford grant when I was in grad school, right?
Right.
There's a person in there who's complaining about a paper she wrote on Afro, mermaidism or some shit. She's literally writing papers about being a goddamn mermaid, and was frustrated at the pushback she got from mainstream academia.
Hey, bro, I'm done with it, bro. Let's look at. Man, let me finish this.
What kind of fucking sense does? Anyway, go ahead.
Let me finish this out. Man.
We're not into individual success, particularly financial or monetary success. We were about movement. We were about profound political and social and economic change.
And look, you hear it, right? It wasn't about financial success, at least in her eyes, right? It wasn't about trying to get the bag or being a boss bitch, you know, or finding a man that's a boss man. It's about, you know, trying to secure distributive justice across the board, right? Now, how many feminists do you hear today? I mean, it's even online. That profess to be feminists talking about distributive justice across the board. How many?
It's not there.
I mean, I'm not saying nobody's doing it, but it's fucking slim pickings.
Ain't nobody watching it.
I'm just saying. But this was part of the radical politics of the 60s and the 70s.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just black people doing it. I mean, you had like Indians doing the shit, Chicanos doing it. You had even poor white folks doing it. Now all of a sudden it's about like what, you know, the politics of sex. And I understand it, but golly, man.
And I think another layer to it, man, is that, you know, Marxist analysis, anti-imperialist analysis was all the rage, man. 60s and 70s. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But once them 80s hit, they got rid of everything related to Marx, damn near everything. So if
that's because they got money themselves. They like Camille Pally explains this shit perfectly. So you had a lot of activists that retreated to the academy, and they became part of the establishment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's like the animal farm. You know, like it's like the pigs in the animal farm. The motherfucker was comrades from the beginning, right? But in the end, guess what ended up happening? I mean, you seen Animal Farm, I assume. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, but let me play some more of this shit, bro.
I don't really have that much else to share with you right now. I know I've gone past my 7 minutes. I believe I have. But I do want to let you know that thing about how identity politics is under attack. Last week, I taped a TV show. Well, it's a YouTube show, not TV. See how old-fashioned I am? A YouTube show. It's a Katie Halper show. And I don't know if people are familiar with it, but it was a conversation with Robin D.T. Kelly and a person named Norman Finkelstein, who I was not aware of before. And Norman Finkelstein has written like a book that's about 500 pages long, in which he attacks identity politics and other things that we hold dear. He seems to like dead black thinkers like Du Bois and Frederick Douglass, and really can't get with us live ones. He said last week when we were taping the show that he had never heard of the Combahee Collective until Katie Halper invited him to be on the show. That told me volumes about the isolation. Why? That program is going to air tomorrow on YouTube too. It's Katie Halper. I don't have any links or anything to send to you right now. But if you want to hear a really interesting discussion, because Robin D.G. Kelly is in it, you know, if you want to hear a really interesting discussion, that might be kind of like supplementary listening and watching for what we're going to continue to talk about this afternoon. Thank you so much, and thanks for this opportunity.
Now, my question is,
the question was about
they had a conversation.
Not being a self-help cult.
Go ahead.
They had a conversation with a Jewish white male. I'm wondering if they would have a conversation with Tommy Curry.
Yeah, they should have been in conversation with black men, no, like in the academy.
You could talk to a Jewish white guy. You could talk to a Jewish white guy who was a critic of identity politics But how come they can't talk to Tom Kerr?
Yeah.
I'm waiting for them to get to Ronald Neal. Shit, that's what I want.
Yeah, or TSI. They don't want to see Gigi. Fine. They don't want to see me.
And what Barbara Smith thinks about that in relationship to how people are discussing things today.
So the question was about self-help. Black feminism being a self-help cult. That's the question.
Is that I feel like people think they know what we meant by the things that were written in the Combahee River Collective Statement, but they take the parts they like and they leave the other parts kind of to the side. Yeah. So there are people who look at the statement and they see Black women's self-empowerment. They don't necessarily see, and in the meanwhile, the only way you're going to get that is to get rid of racial capitalism. They skip that part. You see what I'm saying? And the thing is that I really like the idea of people embracing it wholly. One of the reasons I think it may be hard to embrace it holistically is because of the fact that we don't have, to me, at this time, a sufficient tradition of political study. You cannot get it off of social media. I swear, you cannot get it off of social media. You have to actually read books and read articles.
So Barbara Smith has cautioned us against allowing Black feminism to evolve into self-aggrandizement. Has that happened?
Not speaking
Self-aggrandizement. Does Black feminism create self-aggrandizement amongst Black women?
for the other Barbara, but
Bro.
I don't think it has.
Can I say something right here?
Yeah.
I posted, I have not been on Facebook in a long time, but last year I posted the cover of a book written by a Black woman who's in media. Her name is Charity Elder, and she's in her late 30s. She's one of these Ebony K. Williams types. And the book is called Rise to Power. No, it's called Power. It's called Power, the Rise of Black Women. And every page in that book, she's just arguing for Black women to basically take power wherever they can and don't be afraid to assume power. If that is not self-aggrandizement, bro, I don't know what is. She's made a major turn. She just coming out and said, she's honest. But this is it, man. This is what they've created. A woman, a Black woman in her late 30s who's worked as a media professional, talking about Black women seizing power wherever they can. And I'm going to say another person, Brittany Cooper, and I've read her stuff. Brittany Cooper talks this talk also. Her hero, and she's written this, her hero is Hillary Rodham Clinton. And she likes Hillary Rodham Clinton because Hillary Rodham Clinton is your quote-unquote boss bitch.
See, this is why I used to call Black feminist nationalists, because to me, that bubble I talked about earlier, they're so well ensconced in it. There is no outside of it as far as they're concerned. So to me, the question is moot. Does Black feminism promote self-aggrandizement? They're hand in hand. They're part and parcel. Look what Stuart D. Knight just wrote in the comment section. You want to ask about it? Ask about Black girl magic. What is Black girl magic if not self-aggrandizement? That's precisely what's happening, which is why the question came up, which I'm surprised they asked, but it has to come up at some point because that's what it is. BLM is probably one of the greatest, demonstrations of this.
Yeah, man. Let me check it out. See how she answered the question. Check it out.
Self-aggrandizement, but I do think that kind of fetishizing of Black women that Alethea and Nzinga referred to does happen. And for example, I think, what was the slogan? Listen to Black women, or trust Black women, or something like that. I mean, we have to differentiate. There's unfortunately, in my opinion, Black women conservatives now. There are Black women in the Republican Party. So just by virtue of being Black women, we are not to be exalted. But it's the positionality of the majority of Black women. It is experience of the majority of Black women that then informs, not determines, but informs a politic. So exalting to me, refers to the times in which not all Black women ever, but some Black women position themselves to be spokespeople for the rest, and also, sometimes get rewards for that. I mean, the discussions around the Tyree Nichols murder in Memphis to me was interesting, because people were, it's 5 Black cops, how can it be racism? Well, we also see, if we accept that challenge of Alethea, that we not resort to essentialism in talking about Black women, human beings are capable of all kinds of things, and defining that we in all kinds of ways. And so Black women can run cities that harm other Black people. Black male cops can beat Black bodies in ways that reinforce white supremacist institutions, et cetera. So anyway, that's how I would respond to that question. I don't know.
And I would say this: why not take that positionality that you use at the end of that talk to simply just assert that, like, look, as it pertains to domestic violence, women can be abusers. When it comes to, like, family life, they can be sexual assaulters.
Can't get like that, man.
They can extort people, especially with using the mechanisms of the state. The whole point is, if you're going to argue the truth, then argue the truth all across the board and say some of your politics is a little distorted.
Didn't Susan Rice threaten Snoop Dogg?
Yep. Of course she did. Yeah, she threatened him.
And Susan Rice works in government. She threatened to use the power of the state, the federal government, to arrest and to squash Snoop Dogg if he remotely came close to, threatening, physically, Gayle King.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he just called her a bitch, I think, or something like that. I don't know. I don't even know if he called her.
He just called her a bitch. That's all. But I'm saying she threatened to use the power of the government, the federal government, to squash him.
Right. Yeah.
But look, at the end of the day, man, look, we just have to stop lying. We have to just tell the truth that, like, there are some women who are Black, who are feminist, who utilize the state in such a way as they weaponize it against Black men. We just have to tell the truth about that shit.
Yes.
Like, I mean, pro-Black radicals have to acknowledge that shit.
Yeah. And
and look, don't talk to me about, like, how we're criticizing the women's and all of this shit, and how we, just got little dicks and we're incels and we just mad and shit like that. Like, stop it, bro. Like, half of these guys that are pro-Black haven't even read any feminism at all. I ain't saying that there aren't any who haven't read any of it. I'm just saying, like, let's just face it. The average pro-Black guy out there hasn't read as much feminist politics, philosophy, or literature as we have. I would assume that would just be the case because, like, what reason would they have to read it? There is no reading, like, if there is no requirement to read this shit.
But we also have to talk about what this feminism has evolved into on a practical level. This is why the last couple shows I've been talking about initially what's called litigation abuse. And I started talking about judicial exploitation, meaning that you have as a standard practice in the West, and especially in the Black community, the bringing in of, say, the family court to arbitrate really on behalf of her at the moment of divorce or child custody, right? This is so standard for us. We don't think of it other than this is just what happens. This is just life. This is how men think of it. But what I'm saying is it comes out of a certain feminist worldview. It is backed by practice and policy, and it is something that the average woman can leverage against the average man, whether it's out of vindictiveness or out of a need for genuine resources for the family. My point simply is that these are resources that everyday women can use against men. Men, black men in particular, do not have institutions that operate on our behalf at our whim. And so if you're not going to study the feminist ideas that birth these practices, let alone look at how these practices affect everyday people, then any movement you start is going to be upended by the things that you don't pay attention to. That's why I said this whole question about what role feminist plays in terms of organizations is critical, because it really comes down to family formation in the black community. And if you cannot resolve that by addressing feminism, no matter what movement you start, it will fall from the inside in regard to these very issues.
Yeah, so and all I can say is, yeah, you saw the musings of black women talking about being subjected to victimization, early on, but I think that it really becomes enshrined in the academy with Kimberly Crenshaw's second paper. Okay, I think that paper, when she writes this, mapping the margins, she turns from an interracial critique to an intraracial critique.
Mm-hmm.
And what that then becomes is, like I consider it to be like a Me Too movement before the Me Too movement officially. It's like, okay, well, we're subjected to male dominance via violence and rape. So we need the same kind of resources that white women get. And it's basically, the application of the carceral state to black men.
Yes.
But at the very same time, but the problem is that at the very same time that she's writing this, black men were being subjected to more intimate partner homicide than black women. So how do you square the theory with what's happening on the ground? How? But of course, you utilize Catherine McKinnon. You utilize Andrea Dworkin. You utilize Ellen Pence in order to, make the arguments. Or, as Curry even did, like he's going to say, well, they use racial, social, scientific, subcultural violence theory. Wolfgang and Farrakouti. Menachem Amir. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like, but that's Curry's work. You know what I'm saying? Like he's like, okay, well, like this is where they got all this shit from. Like all they did was look at the fucking footnotes. Like where are they getting this shit from? So she read Catherine McKinnon, but where did Catherine McKinnon get her shit from? What was she reading? Or like what what was the one white woman Silverstone? I forget what the fuck Curry says her name is. I can't remember it at this time. But the whole point is, all he's doing is following the breadcrumbs from the footnotes.
Notice how many black men couldn't get published who might have followed the breadcrumbs prior to Curry. How many of them have there even been? Especially before something like YouTube, the mechanisms for getting ideas out to the public have been closely manicured and watched. And I tell people all the time, I was in Curry sent me a copy of The Man Not when it was still on Microsoft Word. I had conversations with him when he was arguing with publishers. They didn't know in other words, he wasn't really, in my opinion, supposed to be able to publish that. He really wasn't supposed to be able to. But he did. But I'm saying that there's a whole tradition of black men who've been silenced from the mechanisms of public, publications and being able to articulate yourself on the main stage.
Yeah, well, you know, Curry's a different type of guy, though, man. He's a publishing animal, man. So, you know, that's just how he gets down, bro. You know, the only thing I can say is, man, if there's no like, preliminary, not preliminary, but like culminating remarks you want to say, man, you know, because we, you know, y'all been here for 3 hours, you know, so, and I appreciate it, man, you know, like straight up, I really do, bro. You know what I'm saying? Really appreciate y'all taking your time, and I know y'all both, you know, got a lot of shit going on right now, grading papers and everything. I already know. Well, not you, Ron, because you're on sabbatical, from what I understand. But I know you got a lot of shit going on, Hassan. So appreciate that.
Well, Ronald has, you know, different women knocking on his door, so he has to manage that. That takes energy and time. You know, they get upset when they come at the same time. He got to check them. You know,
player from the Himalayas.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
you know,
no,
man.
Yeah, this was no, man, this was necessary, and it was good hearing it, you know, from one of the founders, and especially at the end. And maybe it's just she just has a kind of, you know, her demeanor is the way it is, but I kind of sensed that there was some frustration at the end that didn't get quite expressed when she talked about feminism, you know, morphing into a self-help cult and self-aggrandizement. So it's like you're listening to, you know, she has to be in her 70s right now, and you know, you don't get to hear that from people from her generation, you know, being as honest as she was. So she's looking around social media, she's talking to people and basically saying, this is not what we intended.
Right, y'all corrupting some shit that we started. Like, now I think it has flaws in and of itself. Like, but I think that it could have had it allowed itself to be open to critique, and had it not been seduced by, you know, academic institutionalization and capitalist, you know, tokenism, and it, you know, it would, like, again, but if it would have definitely, you know, continued to keep itself within the tradition of linked fates, like you mentioned, it might have been pregnant with potential, you know, transformative energy. But like as it stands, it's going neoliberal, man. It just is what it is. It is going neoliberal, bro. And not to say that, you know, like getting your bag in and of itself is inherently evil, but getting the bag and throwing like one half of the racial demographic from which you come under the bus in order to get it, that's some evil shit to me.
Yeah, it is.
That's evil to me, bro. Just imagine, like, okay, that's like, I mean, you know, that's like throwing a motherfucker under the bus so you can get ahead, man. That's not cool, bro.
It tells you how little value we hold, you know, in their minds, man. Yeah. I'm gonna drop down, but I appreciate this, man, and all the guys who are watching and all the support. MS Delta guy, I want you to know I got your Cash App, and Corbett Goodwin, I got your Cash App also. So appreciate you guys for your support. I look forward to next time around, man. So you guys take care.
Hey, thank you, man. Take care, bro.
And I also want to thank MS Delta as well as Patricia for that support and the Cash App and the PayPal. And I'm you know, want to extend the thanks to Green Gorilla for having a brother on. So I much appreciate it. And you know,
thank you for coming through, bro.
You know, so thank you for that. But nah, man, as far as this, man, it's you know, it's something that needs to be, you know, unwrapped, unpeeled, you know, unfreighted and examined. And unfortunately, we have had to go outside of the academy to do it, which I think says a great deal. I mean, could this session have been had in the academy without serious pushback? I kind of doubt it. So I think that says a lot, you know, in terms of where we're even having this discussion. And so I appreciate you initiating it, man. So,
hey man, I appreciate you joining me today. I know you had some hiccups with your computer, man. It seemed like you got it up and going though. So,
well, you know, I'm hoping so. But anyway,
yeah.
But you got it, man. I'll holler at you later, man. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Be good, man.
Peace.
Peace. Thank you. So thank you for all the people who supported me today, man. I appreciate your support all the time, man. Shout out to Daryl Davis, Corbett Goodwin, T. Norman, True, McKenzie, Kaylin, Rashad, Corbett. You know, thank all of y'all, man, for supporting me today, man. You know, doing this work, man, it requires a lot of patience and time sometimes, you know, but I appreciate it, man. And I'll be back, you know, maybe not tomorrow, but I probably damn sure will be here Thursday. Look, we just want to have conversations about what we learn about ourselves, man, in real time. And so this was an opportunity to talk about something we've talked about before. But, you know, to me, this is just an indication that, like, a lot of the founding mothers of black feminism in particular, but that they understand that there's some internal inconsistencies and some ways that, you know, the black feminist thought can turn left and has turned left. And we observe it. So we're not mad. We're observing some of the same things that they're observing. And we wish that we could really actually be in conversation with them and have real open and candid conversations. But, you know, they just perceive us as antagonistic and hate us or whatever the case may be a lot of times. So it is what it is. But, hey, man, y'all be peaceful. And I'll holler at y'all on the next one, man. One.